Just a very quick disclaimer, guys. I forgot to mention in this video that I am avoiding leaks, spoilers, and everything like that for Sword and Shield. So if you watch this and you know that certain mons in this video aren't coming back for Sword and Shield, if you know certain mons in this video have new forms in Sword and Shield, or anything like that, I am avoiding as much as I can all spoilers. So please, 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 I beg you, do not comment down below. Hey, this thing's got a new form, are you excited to try it? Or, hey, are you disappointed this isn't coming back in Sword and Shield? I appreciate there will be the temptation to do that, and I completely get why, but yeah, I thought I ought to mention before anybody does that I'm really, really trying to avoid spoilers, so I'd appreciate it if you didn't. Thank you. How's it going, my truant people? DrSlaking, the Slacking Doctor, back with a very special video today, as this is part 1 of my top 10 Pokemon in Gen 7 Draft League. And you're probably looking at the time of this video and you're probably thinking, wow, this is a really long video for part 1. I haven't even recorded it yet, and I know it's going to be relatively long. This is going to be a really detailed analysis of the first 5 mons in my top 10 list. I'm going to be looking at teams that I've used them on, items that I've enjoyed using with them, and even breaking down a couple of replays for each mon. Not full replays, but just segments of each replay to kind of talk about what I think those mons did, why I think they're so good on certain team compositions, and why I think they managed to break into my top 10 here. So this isn't just going to be your standard, hey look, I like this mon, I like that mon. This is going to be a really detailed look at each mon and a really detailed analysis of each mon. I'm going to try and do my best to kind of explain why each of these mons has become a very loved Pokemon for me. Before we get into this, I have to give a huge shout out to my front office. I wouldn't have any of these stats without them, because I would be so much worse at this game without them. So I'm repping the Bowl and Bovines merch today. I just want to shout out the front office because I am eternally grateful to them. And I also want to shout out you guys, because if it wasn't for all of your support on these videos, between Wi-Fi leagues that we do now, Showdown leagues that we used to do, from just 2 years of Draft League content we've had now, and the support has been unwavering, and I'm so grateful to all of you, because I don't think I would have stuck with it this long if you guys hadn't been that way. So yeah, shout out to front office and shout out to you guys. I'm very grateful. What I should say, I need to kind of determine the rules for this. This is going to be a little bit of a long intro, as I'm going to try and explain everything fully. Pokemon have to have played in at least 6 games. That is more than 5. 5 or less, they can't make the list. Because I feel like 5 games is like, you know, you could have it in a short tournament, you could have it in a speed tour one night, you could have it in, you know, and you don't really familiarize yourself. It's not like you're building with it for a full season. It's not like you really would ever. You can't necessarily vouch for how consistent it would be over a longer form. So I really just wanted to make sure that things that made this list had been in 6 or more games, because I feel like at that point, you know, you've played in half the games of the regular season, you've probably been on the team for a good amount of time in a regular sort of 12-week Draft League season. So that's the first rule. The second rule is this is sorted solely on total KOs, so how many Pokemon this has knocked out. That does give a bit of a bias to mons that I've drafted more often and used more often, because they're just able to put up the biggest stats. However, I will have an honourable mentions for the mons that would have made the top 10 if I'd done this based upon differential, i.e. how many knockouts they've got compared to how many times they fainted, and also how many knockouts they've had per game. So the mons that put up really huge numbers very quickly, that maybe I just haven't drafted enough to see them make the list as a total number of KOs. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I should also say that this video is going to be very heavily edited and probably recorded possibly over a number of days. So my clothing, the lighting, everything could well change, and I apologize for any continuity issues. But can you believe it? I'm going to do editing. I'm going to do actual editing, and I've also made all of the graphics for this video myself. So if you guys appreciate me putting in work for the first time probably ever, please do like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Comment down below what your opinions are on all of these mons, and what your opinions are on Draft League in general. Anything else you want to say, any mons that you would have said in your top 10, whatever, that's fair enough. I don't usually ask for kind of interactions like that, but I'm actually doing something for once. I'm putting in work, so I feel entitled. I feel very entitled to ask. No, but seriously, it would mean a lot if you could. Other than that, I feel like there was something else I was supposed to say. Little Cup and Ubers leagues are not included because they're unmetas and I don't like them, but low tier leagues are, because I've done a number of low tier league seasons and thoroughly enjoy it. So that does make it, as I see that as a more full meta, a more I don't know, just a meta I like, essentially. As I say, this isn't based upon opinion. This isn't me saying, oh, I like this mon more than this mon. This is based solely on, I use this mon better than this mon, apparently. My opinion notwithstanding. So, I think that I'm sure I will remember the other thing I had to tell you guys, but right now I don't remember it. So, we're just going to jump in with the honorable mentions, and this episode, next episode will be up tomorrow with the top 5. This is number 10 through to 6. This episode, we have the honorable mentions based on differential. These are ones that if we were doing it solely on differential instead of on total KOs, they would have made the top 10. Next episode tomorrow, we will have the honorable mentions, which would have made it in on KOs per game, so how quickly they were racking up KOs, but just didn't have the total number to break into the top 10. So the honorable mentions for this episode are Tauros China Shop, which I've used in low tier format and Surge format recently. Mega Latios, the aeroplane emoji, which I used in Owl, which was just a regular OU format, but Mega Latios was unbanned, Team League. Honchkrow Juan, which I used in Surge recently, and only in Surge. It shows you how far I got in Surge, that this actually, from a relatively small tournament, was able to post up enough games played to make the list. And Samurott, greater than Suicune, these nicknames, terrible, which I've been using in LTC recently. We traded for it on about week 4, and it's been like an ever-present in the team ever since. It just played its 6th game this week to make it in. I will be using it again next week, and should I make playoffs? Probably again in playoffs. I think I've got 2 weeks left as well with it, so this thing really could have been in danger of putting up lower scores if its differential falls over the next few weeks, but for right now, Samurott makes the cut, so it's there. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one in this honorable mentions list, but nowhere near as much detail. So, Tauros, I want to start off with Tauros. 14 KOs, 6 feints, plus 8 differential, 10 games played, 1.4 KOs per game. Pretty good. I really like Tauros, actually. Pleasantly surprised. Dean was the one that drafted it for me in LTC. We agreed that he was going to draft my team in LTC, but then he would build it around a mon that I agreed with, and I agreed with Tauros. We both thought it was cool. I've tried different things with this thing. I also drafted it myself in Surge. I prefer, my favorite sets are Work Up with a Life Orb, Sheer Force, and then like Body Slam, Fire Blast, or Ice Beam, something like that. Earthquake, Zen Headbutt, any kind of coverage like that, Iron Head maybe, and Substitute. But I do really like Work Up plus Life Orb, Sheer Force. I just think with its speed tier at 110, especially in the low tier format where I've predominantly used it, this thing is a phenomenal mon, definitely underrated. And if you can break down the bulky steals and rock types for it, which it does have coverage for an Earthquake, but it then takes the Life Orb recall, doesn't get a Sheer Force boost, it's not naturally that strong without the Sheer Force boost, it's not ideal. But if you can break those down, then it goes really, really well. And Ghosts, of course, I think it does like a good Pursuit Trap. It's Pursuit Trap Ghost because it just doesn't hit them very well at all. Payback, I think, and maybe even Pursuit, or it's only Dark type coverage, which are not very strong at all. Next up, we have Honchkrow Juan, 12 KOs, 4 feints, plus 8 differential, exact same differential as Tauros, in just 7 games played, 1.7 KOs per game. Really, really impressed with this thing. I always thought about drafting Honchkrow. I'm very much suited to using mons that can kind of steamroll with things like Beast Boost, Moxie, and Speed Boost, Moxie, and Beast Boost. They're the kind of 3 abilities that I probably like most in Pokemon. Honchkrow I like to use as a Moxie Dreadplate Sucker Punch Sweeper, but I also enjoyed running it with Tailwind because if people would try and go for a passive move to stall out your Sucker Punch, you can get a Tailwind off, or if they try and switch on your Sucker Punch, you get a Tailwind off. Suddenly you don't actually need your priority to beat them anymore, and you have Brave Birds going crazy with those Moxie boosts. So yeah, this thing I only used in Surge, and the fact that it was able to put up these numbers in one short tournament, not a short tournament, but one tournament, shows you how much I loved it and how much I really enjoyed using it, and it could have done so much more. I did have some other sets like Wakanberry, I think I had a Scope Lens Super Luck set one week, which was nice because I got Parting Shotted, but the drops didn't matter because I was able to just crit through them. And also, I did run an Adrenaline Orb Nasty Plot set that never got to hit the field in one game. That would have been pretty heat too against an Incineroar, so I could just basically set up and sweep through at +1 speed and +2 special attack. So yeah, definitely think Honchkrow's got some cool niche options. A little bit bulkier than people realize because it has such bad defenses but such high HP. I don't actually like it with the Life Orb because you can usually take one hit okay, and so that Life Orb just isn't good because it stops you from taking that one hit. It basically just racks up the damage on you passively. I would much rather run it like Dreadplate or something like that. Anyway, next up we have Airplane Mega Latios. Obviously, no item to talk about in this thing. I found Calm Mind to be very, very good. In general, I pretty much exclusively ran this thing bulky timid. There was only 1 week where I ran it modest, I think, maybe 2. More when Eric got hold of it, that was more his building style than my own, but my building style was just to make this thing fast and fat. Max HP, max speed, because it's so damn strong anyway, it doesn't matter, it still tears through teams. Calm Mind is just very, very good in this thing. Side Shock, of course, and you can beat up other Calm Mind, setup threats. So yeah, with 14 KOs, 5 feints, plus 9 differential, it does have the highest differential of any of them here, and joint highest total KOs in just 10 games played, the same KOs per game as Tauros, so definitely putting up impressive stats too. And then last up, Samurott here. As I say, I've only used this thing in 6 games. The last game was its first feint. It got no KOs and 1 feint because I got greedy. Before that game, it was on 5 games played and 9 KOs, 0 feints, so it was doing crazy before then. I could only have got 1 KO within the last game. Toasty got me good. But still, this could have been at 10 KOs and 1 feint if I hadn't got greedy, so more fool me. It could have had plus 9 differential and been joint with Mega Latios, but as it is, it's on plus 8, joint with Tauros and Honchkrow. Very, very decent stats. Can't speak too much on it. I've really enjoyed Swords Dance Aquajet. I've really enjoyed Banded. I don't think I've ran Special even once yet, so hopefully I can find a niche for Special soon. Regardless, they are the honorable mentions out of the way. Like I said, this is going to be a long video, a lot of talking, so I hope you guys are buckled in and ready for this. Next, we will be moving on to our number 10. So coming in at number 10 on the list, we have Mariabella the Swellow. And as I say, these are going to be a little bit more detailed because we are into the actual top 10 now. This thing has 17 KOs, 13 feints, plus 4 differential in 19 games. So it actually has less KOs than games, only a plus 4 differential, and a KO per game average of 0.89, which is, it's not great. It's not great. Really, this thing made it in on the basis that I drafted it twice in LTC, that I used it as a wall breaker in almost every single game both seasons. And I had relatively successful season the first season. It would have better numbers if it didn't take me the first 5 games to realize I only want choice specs on this. Most ones on this list will have 2 items, as I kind of talk about 2 different items I like to run on them. Nah, not Swellow. I like specs on Swellow, and everyone complains, you only run specs. It's so easy, you only run specs. Yep, but it's just the best Swellow. I tried Flame Orb, I tried Silk Scarf, and I always lost when I ran those sets, but I tended to win when I ran specs. So yeah, for me, just slap specs on this thing, click Boom Burst. You can run modest, especially in the low tier format where things are pretty slow. I've never tried this thing in a higher tier format, so I can't speak on it there. But yeah, as I say, I do think that this thing has been a decent servant for me, but definitely on these stats, one of the more underwhelming ones in my top 10. Really here on merit of being drafted so much, but I mean, that shows you how much I like it, I guess. That being said, let's jump into the breakdown of the sets that I've used and a replay with this thing. I believe we only have 1 set and 1 replay for this, but it's against someone special, so hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So here we are with the Team Builder segment for Swellow, and this team was brought to the LTC Season 1 semi-finals. This was actually my first time making playoffs in any league I'd been in. It was actually my first time making a final in any league I'd been in, and Swellow really did carry me there a little bit that season, so I thought this was a really good one to talk about. We do go up against Gareth in this game. Gareth is a good friend of mine. I don't like him, but he's a good friend of mine. And I wanted to talk about this team a little bit. Now, this is one of the few Swellow teams that I had saved. In fact, it might have been the only one that was readily available. I think I did, yeah, I think this was the best one I could find. So I want to talk about this one now. It isn't that Swellow does a ton of work in this match, but I really want to talk about how I drafted around Swellow this season and how I thought I did really well with that. So, and why I thought this team was able to take me to my first ever final when I really was not very good at this game, frankly. But huge shout out to everyone that helped me team build during the season. Obviously, I did my shout out to my front office at the beginning of the video, but this was back predating the front office even. So we had a choice spec Swellow with Boom Burst, Toxic, Sleep Talk, and U-Turn. Gareth had a Carnivine, so I'm guessing I was worried about Sleep Powder Carnivine. He might have brought that earlier in the season. Maybe had a Hypnosis user, but regardless, maybe I just didn't feel like I needed anything else. I honestly often don't with Swellow. So I just ran Boom Burst with the Scrappy being able to hit Ghost. He does have a Miss Drivus that we can hit with that, and U-Turn just being able to pivot, Toxic being able to wear down maybe some bulky things, like a bulky rock type, which I don't think he had. So this thing just had great matchup. If you don't see a really good steel type on your opponent's team, especially in a low tier format, Specs Boom Burst just goes crazy. Because it was a relatively slow draft, we were able to bring Modest to this game. So that was a pretty cool set from Mariabella here. Now, what I want to talk about is how I drafted around it in the team composition. So, not only did I pair it with how do I want to word this? I tried to pair it with things that you can see here in these next 3 mons on the team builder that really covered its weaknesses pretty well. So the main thing that I found was always revenge killing Swellow was faster electric types, scarf electric types that were happy to scarf into Volt Switch, or that was pretty much it, really, because not many rock types want to run Scarf, and not that many rock types can revenge kill that easily. There were some fast ice types, but predominantly it was faster electrics and Scarf electrics were the main problem, or electrics that were deaf enough that I couldn't pick them off in one hit. So in this game, for example, there is an Ampharos. So what I paired it with is a really good electric resist here that applied offensive pressure, and this is important. This thing with Leaf Blade, Earthquake, X-Scissor, and Pursuit was able to basically hit all of Gareth's team really well, and with the Assault Vest was able to take hits pretty nicely. Again, with its speed tier, I was able to run it Adamant. If something wanted to scarf into Thunderbolt, then I would be able to come in and potentially set up in other games when I ran Swords Dance on this kind of a set. So yeah, it was just able to apply offensive pressure whilst coming in on those electric types specifically. Next up we have Tyson the Pachirisu, one of my favorite mons. I believe, if I'm correct, this mon actually is, based upon differential, the worst mon I have ever used, and yet I keep drafting it over and over because I love it in low tier format. It's so good. This is just a very bog standard Spadef Volt Absorb. I'm going to come in on your Ampharos when you click Volt Switch. I'm going to click Nuzzle, Super Fang, Toxic, and I'm going to U-turn out. That's what Tyson does. It's the world champion. You can't knock her. She's so good. Yeah, this set was very, very simple, but unlike Fern, the Sceptile, which really applies offensive pressure when it comes in, this thing doesn't, but it applies great support, because if I can Nuzzle maybe a choice Scarfer, or maybe something faster than Swellow, if I can Super Fang a wall that Swellow wouldn't be able to hit KO without that Super Fang, or if I can Toxic and spread that around and wear down my opponent's team, then that is really, really huge. For example, Ampharos, which I wouldn't be able to Oko with a Boom Burst, if I can get a Super Fang off on it once I come in, if he chooses to stay in to try and Toxic me, then suddenly that Ampharos will die the next time it comes in on my Swellow. I can just stay in. I don't have to switch out once if I know it's not Scarf or whatever. So it was just a really good team support mon to wear things down into range of my Boom Burst. And another really good pivot to electric types. Speaking of which, we had a decent ground type here in Camerupt, very reliable stealth rocker. The solid rock kind of negating that 4x weakness a little bit. Decently strong with 105 special attack and 100 attack. This week we brought a heavy slam mixed offensive set with earthquake and lava plume. Pretty cool actually. Pretty cool set here. This thing, again, same principle, just making sure that those electric types are really dealt with. Doesn't resist ice or rock, so this was one of the weaknesses that I felt that I had on this draft, was that I didn't really deal with the ice and rock types as well as I would have liked. I did have Sork on here to kind of help with the rock types, a relatively bulky fighting type-ish. I think Throw would have been better for that. And I did have a bulky wall to deal with the ice types, but I do think maybe a better ground and a better fire separated out would have been better team support for Swellow, and that's probably something I would have looked to have done with drafting it a second time. We did have Blastoise this season nicknamed after J-Creams, which did do really, really well with Scold, Fake Out, Toxic, and Rapid Spin. I didn't really like Blastoise very much at all, but it was a good ice resist, and that's really what is on the team to do, to Rapid Spin away the rocks. I spoke about supporting Swellow. I do think Spinners are really good to support Swellow. You want to get Swellow on the field as much as possible, which means that you want to get rocks off the field as much as possible, but you also want hazards to chip things down in range of Boom Burst, so I felt like Rapid Spin was an essential team support for Swellow. And then finally, we have a Thunderwave Gramble with Heal Bell. Again, being able to Heal Bell off status if I want to stay in on things like Thunderwaves with things, potentially get Toxic, whatever. Heal Bell is really, really nice for that. And Thunderwave, again, just slowing down potential Scarfers that could otherwise outspeed Swellow, makes Swellow a fantastic win con, essentially. Just slow things down, get everything, make sure that his Scarfers can't beat me, get everything in range. This was very Fizz Def, I'm not sure what for, but obviously I had my reasons with the Intimidate on there too. Yeah, just felt like this was a really good way of supporting Swellow, and I feel like this team did it pretty well. So, all that being said, let's jump into replay and see exactly how Swellow got on. So here we are in the battle, guys, against Gareth, and you can see here the kind of team that he's got, the team composition. I mean, look at Swellow, look how crazy it goes. It outspeeds everything on his team naturally, barring Scarfers, which means that he almost certainly has to have a Scarfers to try and revenge kill me. It is unresisted against his team. It shows just how scary Swellow is, this kind of team composition, and that scrappy ability showing why it's so good with a ghost type being there on his team. We spoke about Tauros in the honorable mention struggling with the ghost types. This is a normal type that really doesn't. It only has 2 checks, and they are steel and rock types. So yeah, you can see here that Swellow has the potential to just go crazy. So we're going to speed through a little bit as we kind of chip each other down. most of this is relatively uninteresting, and I'm just trying to figure out at this point what the Scarfer is. We see that Mesprit isn't the Scarfer, as he shows a Chesto Berry here. We see that the Crit Earthquake there into his Delphox, showing that that thing wasn't scarfed anyway. Then out comes the Mesprit, and the Mesprit actually goes for the Shadow Ball there, revealing that it is scarfed. So we now have located the Scarfer on his team. So we know with two things already down that Swellow actually can just win this game pretty much, apart from the Mesprit. This is the only thing that can take a hit from Swellow, so in my opinion this probably wasn't Gareth's play. He probably had to sack the Ampharos or sack the Carnivine and then go into this thing to apply some pressure. But he actually goes hard into it, does not take the Modest Boom Burst, and again, he probably calced expecting to take Timid Specs Boom Burst, but showing there the difference that running Modest makes, just giving us that crushing power. He goes out into this thing to be scarfed to Thunderbolters, but now that we found what his Scarfer is, we know he has to lock into Thunderbolt to kill Swellow. Again, showing that team composition, having that really bulky ground, but actually a relatively strong ground that in this point of the game I don't need rocks, so I can just start exerting offensive pressure, and went for straight for the Lava Plume there, because it was like, why not, right? It's going to do a ton to Ampharos and it'll just straight up KO Carnivine if that thing comes in. Now this thing has to come in and I can just go for the Earthquake and knock that out. And this thing has to try and 1v1 me with the Heavy Slam, with me having Heavy Slam, which it just isn't going to be able to do. So it kind of shows here that while Swellow only picked up 1 KO on the Mudsdale, how well it kind of forced his hand, forcing that Scarfer that really doesn't have matchup against this team. Scarf Thunderbolt isn't good against these three mons, and I've shown you kind of why picking up this huge threat that was so centralizing that it got banned by Season 3. It shows you that by drafting these things around it, it really opened up the door for the other mons. Swellow, though its stats have still been good enough to make my top 10, they haven't been crazy, and this is a little bit why, because what it did is it forced so much prep by my opponents that it opened up the door for Camerupt in this particular game to go crazy. So that is the breakdown of Swellow. Like I said, this was one of the ones that I had less teams readily available for, less replays readily available for, but still, hopefully you guys got something interesting from this. Hopefully there was something to glean from this. Regardless, we will move on now to the number 9 Pokemon. And now coming in at number 9, we have Keanu Reeves, the Porygon-Z. This thing, man, I could have put so many items for this thing. For a little while, I was like, Specs is the only Porygon. It's not. This thing can run so many good items. Specs with that 135 special attack and adaptability does go crazy, like absolutely crazy. I remember playing Eric, him switching in with his Celesteela, taking like 30% on a Spadef Celesteela, just being like, what is this thing? Him going into his Milotic and taking like 80% and being like, damn, what's happening right now? So strong, such a fantastic mon. I've ran Scarf to very good success before. I've also ran some pretty cool sets, one of which I'm going to showcase in the next segment. But before we get onto that, let's talk about its stats. 17 KOs and only 10 feints, giving it a +7 differential, so it wouldn't quite have made the top 10 on differential. You can see here how those mons that I gave the honorable mention to with a +8 would have just crept in ahead of it. But it still has done very well to get 17 KOs and only 10 feints in 12 games, with KOs per game average of 1.42, meaning it KOs nearly 1.5 Pokemon per game. Really, really impressive. I think this thing, the fact that you can guarantee solidly more than a KO per game, that it would take more than one down with it, is really, really impressive. That's a really very valuable thing to have. And like I say, it's like a Swiss Army knife. It can do so many things, and I really hope you guys will see that in the next bit. But I have drafted this thing in the NPL tryout tournament in PEBA, and then I traded for it in OWL. So I've had this thing on 3 different drafts. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with it at this point. I know what it likes to be paired with. I know how to use it pretty well. And yeah, I'm going to give you a little breakdown of some of the sets I've ran before. So here we are with the team breakdown for Porygon-Z, and it's worked out quite nicely. This at the front of the team again. This is not deliberate, it's just how it's going. This was against Toasty Rex in the PEBA regular season. This was just a replay that I felt I could show off the Scarf set pretty well and show you just how strong a PZ can be in this game. Again, just like with Swellow, I'm going to try and talk about the team composition a little bit around this thing and why I think that it worked pretty well on this team. So we ran a modest set here with a very, very high special attack stat with that adaptability boost. Tri-attack is going to go crazy in this game. We have Ice Beam and Hidden Power Steel. I'm not sure what the coverage was to hit. I should have watched this replay back before recording this. I did that for the last one, but I forgot for this one, so please forgive me. Then we have a Specs Jellicent. Really, really fun Jellicent set. I love Jellicent, so yeah, max speed, modest Specs. these things are going to be doing some fun together. Hydro Pump, Shadow Ball, Ice Beam, Sludge Wave, Water Absorb. This thing was designed to take on his Azumarill, I know that much. Then we have All World, the Mandibuzz here. Tailwind, really nice team support. Rocky Helmet, yeah, just decent pivot. Now, one thing that's really, really nice is this thing only has one defensive weakness, and that is fighting types. So the fighting types that might want to come in to revenge kill me, I have a really, really good immunity here. And then I just have a fat bird here. Mandibuzz is not a fighting type resist, but sometimes it might as well be. It is able to hit them for super effective damage, and unless they are very, very strong or choiced or something like that, they generally can't hit Mandibuzz too well, and choiced sets aren't very good against a Jellicent. So, yeah, these two together formed a really nice defensive core to support Keanu Reeves, taking on those fighting types for it. The one thing that this thing can't really hit is ghost types. Having a good dark type that can come in on ghosts, not really care about them, and then potentially, I haven't run on this set, but potentially U-turn back out is also really, really nice. I did like to run U-turn a lot on this, but Mandibuzz does have a little bit of 4 move slot syndrome, so it didn't get to do it as much as I would have liked, but still. It kind of shows here that how we deal with those fighting types and those ghosts. We also do want to talk about steel types and to some extent rock types too, which brings me on to our Mega Altaria, which was a Dragon Dance Steel Wing return with Draco Meteor on here, presumably to hit something. Who knows what? I don't. But what this thing does really well to support Keanu Reeves is if you're building for this team and you're trying to build your steel type to take on my draft here, do you build it physically defensive? With a Shuka Berry, so that you can come in on Mega Altaria, you can take its return on the switch in, you can take its Earthquake with your Shuka Berry, and you can KO it with, say, Meteor Mash or Flash Cannon. Do you build it that way, or do you build it in a Spadef way with, say, an Assault Vest, so that you can try and take on Keanu Reeves, the Porygon-Z? This was a really, really good way of having 2 mons that both pressured the same typing on my opponent's team. Rock types are not very common in the Draft League format, so there wasn't that many rock types that Keanu Reeves had to worry about, and ghost types also are not super common in the OU, at least, Draft League format. They are kind of drafted as spin blockers sometimes, but they're not super, super common. So the most times, teams were really looking at their steel types and like, okay, which way do I build it? And they were having to find alternative checks to Porygon-Z because Mega Altaria looked like the primary threat. A lot of people were bringing Fizz Def, Shuka Berry, or whatever. Maybe with a Occa Berry if they thought I would bring special to try and take the Fire Blast or something like that, but most of the time we were seeing a lot of physically defensive sets, so that meant that Porygon-Z was doing way more damage to them with its Tri-Attack. They weren't able to switch in Porygon-Z. To give you a good example, Metagross. If you brought a Metagross that was relatively physically defensive, it would get decimated by this Specs Modest Tri-Attack. It would get destroyed by it, or by the Scarf Modest Tri-Attack, sorry. I was going to show a replay where this thing essentially 3-hit KO'd a Jirachi by just forcing Jirachi to switch in, hitting it with the Specs Tri-Attack, switching out, forcing Jirachi to switch in, hitting with the Specs Tri-Attack, switching out, and that way I just broke down a Jirachi, and obviously that's a base 100-100 mon, so I really feel like these two are a fantastic pairing together. Different speed tiers as well, which is really, really nice. One with a setup threat speed-wise, the other one with a trick set as well, which can be really, really nice. But with a specially set up set as well, so you can run it double setup to speed boosting, attack boosting, specially attack boosting. You can run trick to cripple opponents that, like something like a Bronzong, for example, that could wall you pretty well. You can trick it a Scarf, and now that Bronzong is essentially useless, especially if it's relying on its Gyro Ball for damage. So, yeah, really, really fun sets here, and these two make a great pairing, in my opinion. And then, speaking of just beating Steel types, because what you don't want to do is find at the end of the game that there's a Steel type that you just cannot break through. Say a Celesteela. Celesteela is a bad example because it's off the ground, but something of that ilk, where these two are just like, okay, we've tried, but we just haven't been able to break through it, and you are going to lose late game to defensive Steel win con. Well, suddenly you have a Life Orb Sheer Force Nidoking, Modest again with Earth Power. That thing's dying. We do have the physical coverage super arrow on here for something. I don't know what. I can't remember. But yeah, this thing just phenomenally good wall breaker. Again, splitting that speed tier difference between these two. It's not essential, but it's just nice. It works really well. And I felt like these three worked superbly well together because these two shared one common check, and this beat their common check really, really nicely. So another fighting resist, of course. If you want to go into something more offensive than Dutchman, you can pivot out into this thing, take a fighting hit. Okay, if it's a slow fighting type, you can then exert a lot of offensive pressure yourself. Last up, we have Miltank. This thing wasn't super designed to pair with Porygon-Z, I won't lie. It was just on the team from the beginning as a good bulky rocker, Spadef pivot. Yeah, I mean, you could, I guess, run scrappy, banded wall breaker sets to hit the ghosts. Yeah, you probably can't. Yeah, this thing isn't the ideal partner to Keanu Reeves, but You can't have it all, can you? We've had 5 months here that I've explained why I think they work so well with Porygon. I am going to jump into the replay, I think, for this first, and then we'll come back with the second Porygon team. So here we are in the battle, guys, against Toasty, and you can see, looking at his team, his steel type is Cobalion, which is actually a pretty good Porygon-Z check, right? It's relatively bulky, its mixed bulk is okay, and it is a fighting type, so not only does it come in on Porygon-Z, but it threatens to OHKO it immediately. So in a way, this is a team with a relatively decent Porygon check, and yet, unless that thing is Assault Vest or Spadef, it doesn't want to switch in on Porygon, and with Porygon being Scarf in this game, it does potentially outspeed anything but a Scarf Cobalion. And again, Scarf Cobalion does not want to switch in on Porygon. Looking at this team, it is a Mega Garchomp. Everything but Scarfers get outsped by Porygon. I do need to be careful of webs, but other than that, Porygon looks like it can really go to town. There's no real Spadef war, with both Tangrowth and Cloyster being very Fizdef, Azumarill and Garchomp being bulky, but being destroyed by Porygon, as we'll see. We kind of play through some turns. He does catch me with the Justified Boost and then an Iron Head flinch on his Cobalion, going for the Sword Stance on my Roost, and things are looking pretty hairy, but I mean, this shows you why Mandibuzz is just broken as we lower that thing really low down. And then bring out Nidoking to outspeed it and go for the Earth Power, and then the Ice Beam. And then out comes the Garchomp. We got a little bit of chip, and then we go into Porygon, and the fun starts as we OHKO the Cloyster, surprise him outspeeding the Galvantula, 2-hit KO the Garchomp, and put the Azumarill in range of Jellicent. That all happened so damn fast. The game was just pacing along. We were kind of trading, you know, a little bit of damage here, a little bit of damage there, Seismic Tossed, Earthquake, you know, it's all going well. Out comes the threat, and at this point, I'm looking at his team, and I'm like, okay, Galvantula, if it isn't Sash, is going to get destroyed. The only things I don't OHKO is probably the Azumarill and maybe the Garchomp. I'm at this point thinking I OHKO the Garchomp, I'm not going to lie. I think it was a really bulky Garchomp. If he tries going into Cloyster, demolish, straight OHKO from Scarf. Not even Specs from Scarf. This would have OHKO'd if it hadn't on the Sash. I know Cloyster's got no Spadef, but still. He goes for the webs, but I'm not switching, and this is what I'm saying. Porygon is kind of one of those mons where he probably thought he could outspeed me after seeing that I just demolished his Cloyster, not necessarily anticipating Specs, thought he could go for his web safely, and then attack me the next turn. Wasn't able to do that, and we're just able to really run through him here. If he'd had Aqua Jet there to pick me off, it could have done more, but I think he was banded, he said, and so Aqua Jetting would have essentially lost him the game. As he couldn't have then hit Jellicent with the Water Absorb, and Jellicent was able to pick up the final KO. So it kind of shows you here, all happened so quickly, just 18 turns, and Porygon running through Cloyster, Galvantula, and Garchomp, and then getting huge chip on Azumarill. Nearly 3.5 mons, all just bopped by Porygon in a row there, showing you just how powerful this thing is as a wall breaker and as a Scarfer, catching him off guard. So we will jump back now to the team builder section to look at a very, very different Porygon set as we go up against Toasty again. I'm sorry Toasty being in this segment twice. It just happens that I've played him with Porygon twice and they were both really interesting games. So yeah, I'll be back in just a second. So here we are, back with the second team builder segment for Porygon-Z, and this is on a very different team, a very different set. We have a Babiri Berry Diancie here with Moonblast, Earth Power, Heal Bell, and that is going to be very important, and this is just a very reliable Cleric, and very important to spread that status around. I'm going to come to Keanu Reeves last on this team, because yeah, you'll see why. This is a Calm Mind, Psyshock, Dragon Pulse, Latios. It's just a good setup threat. Like I said, I like to run it pretty bulky, so we've got a lot of HP on this thing. We have an Analytic, Assault Vest, Magnezone. Magnezone is just so good. One of my favorite mons for sure. I wish this thing had made the list, but its stats don't reflect how much I love it. Yeah, really, really good mon. Just a good pivot in this game. Then we have a Sandforce Hippo. I don't want Sand Chip, and you'll see why, with Stealth Rocks, Toxic, and Slack Off. And then last up, we have Feraligatr riding his bicycle, best nickname that no one appreciated, with a mixed set here running that Focus Blast for the Avalugg. So, just hinted there towards an Avalugg. We have a set that is a Stall Breaker Porygon. Huge shout out to Eric for essentially cooking up this set. What you basically do is you click substitute on a Blissey, on an Avalugg, on anything that you can't break through that easily. And Blissey was a major thing. And we ran this for Blissey and we ran it for Chansey in the same season. Basically just sub up Toxic, Pain Split, and they can't do anything. We had the Lumberry on here so that I could play it more aggressively, switching in on things. We could have run leftovers, we could have run whatever, but sub Pain Split Porygon, basically they can't, especially if you run like Nasty Plot alongside it. If you had the matchup where you could run Tri-Attack, where you could run, not Nasty Plot, if you could run Tri-Attack, Toxic Sub, Pain Split, where you can just fire off Tri-Attack so that things can't switch into you. I needed Dark Pulse in this game to hit a Ghost type. I think he had a Ghost Steel like Doublade that would have just walled me otherwise. But yeah, if you have that liberty to kind of do that, basically what you do is you sub every time he goes into his special wall with its massive HP, you Toxic it, you keep subbing up, keep subbing, keep Pain Splitting once you get low, you get all your health back because Blissey gives you a ton of health, and either then dies to Toxic or has to switch out and give you another free sub, at which point you can Toxic the next mon coming in or Tri-Attack again, and it's basically just a phenomenal way of breaking through Blissey and Chansey, which otherwise can kind of wall Porygon. I loved this set. I thought this set was so much fun, and I thought it was a really cool way of using Porygon. We did run downloading this because I didn't need adaptability, I wasn't running Stab. I did also run an adaptability return set once so that I could hit something on the physical side because it was a special wall. So it kind of shows you that Porygon, what I want to show you with this set is that Porygon can do more than one thing. It can be both a outright wall breaker and it can be a slow and patient wall breaker. It doesn't just have to instant power. It can slowly wear things down with Toxic Sub, Pain Split. Really, really cool and inventive set that I don't think Toasty saw come in. Let's find out by watching the replay. So here we are with the replay, guys, and this game does come from OWL. This was a huge game. I might upload OWL, so I don't want to talk about exactly what the connotations of this game were, but it was a really, really important game. And you can see here that his team, that Pain Split set is just going to break through things like Blissey, break through things like Primarina that it can't hit with the Dark Pulse. He didn't bring the Doublade, so I could have brought Tri-Attack, which is a real shame, but it doesn't matter. And otherwise just spread Toxic around. There is one problem with this thing being able to break my sub with his skill link and then destroy me, but if he has to go out into his Heracross, then that means that I've already done some good work here. So let's start off by showing this amazing... Oh, can we just talk about that? We're going to slow that down a bit. Let's just talk about... Can we just... I know this isn't the point of this video, but can we just talk about these plays, right? Start off with Latios. Okay, straight into Dancing on the Draco Meter, scouting for Scarf, which he is. Good play. Great play. And then we double, because if he's Scarf, he's switching out, and if he's not Scarf, he's Flash Cannoning. We double into the Feraligatr, catching the Blissey switching, giving us a free Swords Dance. Oh, and then we reveal the Focus Blast, catching him off guard, putting him down at 86 as he just Toxics for 86%. Oh, those plays. Anyway, then we go speed this back up. We pivot around for a bit. We get up our rock so that we pressure those switches. He seems to have some good momentum. We have to switch on this damn thing because Mega Heracross is a threat. We get in Lati. We can fire off his Psyshock. With the rocks up, he now can't just pivot freely into his Hydreigon. And then, crucially, we managed to get our Magnezone in on the Primarina, which gives us a free Volt switch out as we hit him Power Eyes the first time, just to make sure that Thundurus doesn't try and come in and get fancy on the Volt Absorb, meaning it wouldn't take Rocks Chip. We instead go for Thin Power Ice and then Volt Switch on this thing, getting Porygon in. Now, this is why the Lumberry was chosen here, because if I'd come in on a Toxic there, now admittedly, it wouldn't be Toxic and Magnezone. There are plenty of other things I might have wanted to switch out from, such as the Diancie into this. So that's why I ran the Lumberry. And now I can freely go for a substitute. He has to Seismic Toss to try and break my substitute. He needs to stay in at this point. I can Toxic here, knowing that he's going to go for another Seismic Toss because he doesn't want me to get a free sub. And here's where we click Pain Split. We get it all back as he goes for another Seismic Toss, thinking he's got me KO'd, thinking that he's just 1v1 my Porygon. Oh no. Oh no. We've just 1v1'd you. And that is how this set works so beautifully, as I can just keep subbing down here. And if he softballs like he does there, then that's just a free Pain Split for me to get back up to good range of health and more Toxic Chip for him. He can't let me finish this altercation behind a sub, so he essentially has to sack his Blissey, and at that point, I'll let Porygon go down. It's done its job, it's removed the Blissey. Now how does he deal with Magnezone? Now how does he deal with Mega Latios? And now how does he deal with Diancie? And that's what I was going to say. Again, this team wasn't built as around Porygon-Z as the last team was. I traded in for Porygon-Z mid-season, so it wasn't like where I had Mega Altaria that paired with it beautifully, but this thing did still really support Mega Latios pretty well in terms of them both being pressured by Spadef walls and them both being pressured by steel type. So whilst it wasn't the perfect synergy of having one physical, one special that I would have liked to have, it still worked decently well, and it still they still complemented each other and did work as we were able to pick up the win here with Diancie finishing off the game. So yeah, I just felt like this was a really fun Porygon set, showing you some of the more original things you can do with Porygon, and it worked out perfectly in the game, exactly how it was planned to. So, all that being said, let's move on to the number 8 Pokemon. Coming in at number 8, we have Barney, everyone's favorite purple dinosaur in Tyranitar. This thing, a little bit like Swellow, made the list kind of courtesy of me loving it so much. I have a lot to say about this mon and what it pairs really well with. It is a phenomenal Pokemon. I really think Tyranitar is like one of the most slept on tier 1s. People seem to think like, oh, I want sand, let me draft Tyranitar in tier 1. I don't want sand, let me not draft Tyranitar. But like, it's not, I don't think it's a good sand setter. So I don't think you should draft it if you want sand. I think you should draft Hippo probably or Gigalith. I think you should draft it because you want Tyranitar, and Tyranitar is just that good. It's worthy of a tier 1 place, regardless of it being a sand setter. It's phenomenal. Such a good Pursuit Trapper, such a good Stealth Rogger, such a good Dragon Dancer, Rock Polisher, Assault Vest user, and Chople you can see here. Chople is my personal favorite set. I will be breaking down some sets, of course, after this in just a second. But yeah, this thing really, it does make the top 10 courtesy of me drafting it so much with 18 KOs, 17 feints, only a +1 differential, and 23 games played. You can see already this is by far and away the highest games played that we've had, and only 0.78 KOs per game. It isn't guaranteed to get you KOs every game, but it is guaranteed to do important things every game. I feel like, you know, it might not pick up a KO, but it might get 70% on something in Pursuit Traps. It might not pick up a KO, but it might get you rocks and break something down. It just does more than I think its stats suggest here, and it's one of those Pokemon that I think some people will just adore, and others might just find to be meh because of those underwhelming stats. I love this thing, and I'm going to now break down a couple of the teams I've used it on, and a couple of replays in which I think it's done good work. So here we are with the team builder segment for Tyranitar, and I'm going to have to go get a drink after this segment because this is killing my voice. This video is going to be so long. Hopefully I can get it all up before Sword and Shield comes out. That is the goal. Hopefully you guys appreciate this. I know I said this earlier in the video, but I'm going to do it again because my voice is hurting. If you do appreciate this, please give it a like, share it with some other people, spread it around. I'd really appreciate it. Right. This team was the best team I have ever drafted, hands down. Huge shout out to Super Salamence93. Go subscribe to him as well. One of my best friends in the community, top guy. He invited me to play in his subscriber league. This was week 1 in his subscriber league. I will say that most of the people in his subscriber league were new to the draft league format, so I was by far and away, I would say, the most experienced coach that drafted a serious team. There were probably only 2 to 3 other coaches that have participated in close to as many draft leagues as I had. So yeah, it wasn't as highly competitive as some other leagues I've been in, but it was still a great chance for me to try out some different sets. And this team is still really important because the guy that we play right now in this week 1 battle is also the guy that I played in the final of that league. So it shows that he probably was the best player in the league. So it still is a pretty good illustration, as this was the most competitive game, arguably, that we could have had in the league. So, yeah, I felt like this was still very worthwhile talking about, and that's not meant to discredit anyone else in the league. That's just the reality of it being a league for people to learn, and I thought that was an awesome thing for him to do. So, anyway, let's talk about this team composition and why Tyranitar is so damn good on this team. Well, let's start by saying no sand. No sand, and what I mean by no sand is, yes, it's sand stream, but no sand rush, no sand force, and that doesn't matter. I didn't draft any sand rush or any sand force on this team. My normal type was Gumshoes, not Stoutland. My ground type was Quagsire and Gligar, not Excadrill, and it was fine. In fact, it was more than fine. It was superb because you do not need sand abusers with Tyranitar. So let's talk a lot about this team. We have a fairly standard Whimsicott, offensive Whimsicott with Stun Sport plus Nature Power. My opponent had a Tapu Fini, basically meaning I could get Prankster Moonblast in this game. Pretty nice tech that was running VGC, which is where I picked it up from when I used to watch a bit of VGC here and there. And that's Stun Sport just for speed control. That is not the most important partner for Tyranitar. It does sponge the fighting hits pretty well and get a momentum back because this thing can U-turn and it can also memento. So the 2 things that you can do to this thing to regain momentum are still really nice with Tyranitar, but for the most part, and the fact that it's a fighting resist, this thing wasn't hugely important to pairing with Tyranitar. Yes, Tyranitar is a good poison resist for this thing as well, which is pretty nice. So yeah, they probably have more synergy than I'm giving them credit for. Good taunter and stuff as well. But for the most part, these 2 mons aren't especially like you have to have them together. This mon, however, pairs so damn well with Tyranitar. Mega Medicham is my favorite Mega by leaps and bounds, by streaks, by any other adjective you want to use. It is so damn good, and the reason it pairs so well with Tyranitar is it has one check. There is one thing in this game that can check Mega Medicham, and by check it, I mean switch in on it, and that is a bulky Psychic type. What is the one thing that a bulky Psychic type hates to see? A Tyranitar. So yeah, I absolutely adore these two together. I think they pair so well. And you can see here, this is just a very standard Jolly. I mean, look at these spreads. These are very, very standard spreads. 252 max attack, Jolly, high jump kick, Zen headbutt, poison jab, bullet punch. Poison jab, of course, for the Tapu Fini, bullet punch for priority for some of his faster threats. Then we have Skywards, the Tornadus. I do think this thing pairs pretty nicely with Tyranitar too, just because Tyranitar can kind of U-turn, can get brought in off the U-turn momentum, which is really nice. It also pairs really nicely with Mega Medicham. But it's a really, really good ground resist. So the ground types that might want to switch in on your Rock Stab, and then might want to Earthquake you. Well, I can go into Tornadus now, and now I can click U-turn on your ground type that's probably going to switch out, and I can get momentum back in my favor. Your fighting types that want to come in and click close combat, hey look, I have a sponge that I can run Rocky Helmet on that recovers its health just by switching around. Tornadus and Tyranitar pair really, really nicely together, really, really well. Bulky flying types in general are good with Tyranitar, but in my opinion, if you're an offensive player, this is something that I probably should have said earlier in the video, most of these teams are going to be a very offensive playstyle because that's how I play. So these team compositions, if you wanted to run Tyranitar stall, you probably could, but I wouldn't be the player to analyze or talk about that especially well. Not at the minute anyway, not without giving it a lot more research and thought. Nevertheless, these two, as I say, I just think they pair really, really nicely because they cover each other's, well, they cover Tyranitar's weaknesses really, really well. Obviously, Tyranitar doesn't resist too much for Tornadus, but it doesn't really matter. It still partners it pretty well. Next up, we have Kartana, Broken Mon. This was a Chople Berry to basically resist, I think, Vacuum Wave from Lucario in this particular game for attacks, Beast Boost through, again, standard set. Then we have a Tyranitar here, slightly less standard set. Now, this is the key thing, Chople Berry Pursuit. This was designed to take on a Mesprit specifically with the Pursuit, which was his bulky Psychic type. The Chople Berry was for something else, and it can't be Lucario because I can't touch Lucario, and Lucario would probably still decimate me with the close combat. I don't remember what the Chople Berry was. Maybe I thought that Mesprit got physical coverage, honestly. I might be that dumb. But yeah, this thing basically, without even need to run any Spadef, it's going to take Signal Beams for days from Mesprit. It's not going to care. It's going to be able to Pursuit Trap Mesprit really, really nicely. And then that is going to free up Mega Medicham. And then the last one we have here, which partners really, really nicely with Tyranitar, also with Mega Medicham, but with Tyranitar as well, is a Sticky Web Arachnid, because you can slow down those bulky, those faster Psychic types. So something suddenly like, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of a relatively fast, grounded Psychic. Let's take a Delphox, right? Delphox, if you've already got Chip on you, might stay in to try and, like, Grass Knot you or something like that. Well, now it can't after the Sticky Webs. It is slower than you, so it's really then forced to try and switch and get Pursuit Trapped. So there's a really, really nice way of basically forcing them out by making them slower than you and then just Pursuit Trapping them. I do think these two pair really, really well together again, but as I say, this thing was almost more for these two, but it doesn't hurt to have webs with Tyranitar. I think if you want to use Tyranitar more offensively and not just as a Pursuit Trapper, which I did at times during this season, then Sticky Webs are really, really huge for that, and Icy Wind as well, just to slow things down as they maybe KO you, and then you can bring in a slightly slower Revenge Killer like Tyranitar. I think is a really underrated move. So yeah, that's enough of that. I do think this team was a really, really well composed team with Tyranitar being an essential cog. This is really the season where Tyranitar posted up most of its numbers because it came to pretty much every game, and it's because it just paired with everything else so nicely on this team. So let's jump into the replay and kind of analyze how it all went down. So here we are in the battle, guys, and you can see here some of the mons we spoke about in the Team Builder and Tapu Fini Lucario, also Salamence, which was part of the reason we had Icy Wind to make sure that that thing couldn't Dragon Dance upon me, and specifically the Mesprit hiding there behind Tyranitar's wing, behind Salamence's wing. So let's sort of talk about how Tyranitar gets into this game as I lead off with it. So I'm able here to just get my rocks up because of Tyranitar's natural bulk. I'm really okay just clicking rocks here. This thing, unless it's running like Hidden Power Fighting, which I have the Chople Berry anyway, doesn't really have any coverage to hit me very well. Things like Flamethrower, I think it maybe get Signal Beam possibly, but still, like, it's not going to do too much. Out comes the Tapu Fini, showing that he's going to probably try and pivot in on this thing as a Dark Resist, primarily, rather than thinking of, say, a Rock Resist like the Lucario, which could also take a Crunch and get the Justified boost, showing me that maybe my opponent doesn't want to play super aggressive and uses Lucario as a pivot. So we do just get rocks up really nicely, and then we're going to pivot out into the Whimsicott, lose the Whimsicott, and go out into Medicham. And this is a really crucial turn, because here, by going into Medicham, I basically say, look, I know you're not Scarf anymore because I outspeed you with Whimsicott, and I can actually just Poison Jab you here and kill you. So we bring out the Mesprit, and we double into Tyranitar on the rocks, and now we can pursue. And if he chooses to stay in, like he chooses to switch like he does, we get massive amount of damage off. This thing is now at 23%. Rocks are up. It can only switch in twice anyway, but it definitely can never switch in on a high jump kick. So that shows you just in 5 turns what Tyranitar plus Mega Medicham does. Just simply just making that double, getting rocks up, making the double, even if, you know, I'd got it wrong and he'd stayed in with his Tapu Fini to Moonblast into my Tyranitar, hey, then I could have just done what I do right now, which is Stone Edge his Tapu Fini the next turn and pick it off anyway. So it's that thing where Tyranitar is just so bulky, because I wouldn't have died to Moonblast with Sand Up and stuff. It's just so bulky, it's incredible. And here showing what Skywards does, pivoting in on the Lucario, and then firing off its Flyinium Z, guaranteeing a KO. But just there again, showing that fighting type resist can come in. We do take the rock type move pretty well, being able to taunt and stop the setup and stuff. This stuff is fairly unrelated to Tyranitar, to be fair, and just kind of showing the rest of the game, so you get a gist of what's going on, as we're just Icy Winding to stop the Salamence from getting too far ahead of itself. And now comes in the threat. Medicham with its Zen Headbutt, killing that. Missing the Darmanitan, otherwise that would have been a clean sweep for Medicham with the webs up. So it really shows you what Tyranitar can do in a team support role in this game, primarily just opening that door for what would have been a clean sweep for Medicham. So yeah, this isn't so much, it's not supposed to be a Medicham showcase, it's just showing what Tyranitar really does in that little pocket. Getting rocks up, Pursuit Trapping a bulky Psychic type, and then Stone Edging the bulky Fairy, freeing up your fighting type to just go crazy. So yeah, Tyranitar just putting in the finest of work there, and then of course Kenji doing what Kenji does and picking up a couple of KOs at the end of the game. So that is one example of what you can do with Tyranitar. Next we're going to look at a slightly more creative set. So here we are with the slightly more creative set. Same league, same draft. I didn't have any NPL Tyranitar replays that I really felt like I wanted to show, which was the other league that I used Tyranitar in. So I just stuck to this because I felt like I had 2 really good replays from this league to kind of showcase Tyranitar. We have a just Drain Punch sub Mega Medicham, decent Wall Breaker, just obnoxious sub Toxic Drain Punch. I think this week I didn't want to use Pursuit Trap Tyranitar, so this was a way of breaking through a bulky Psychic by just sub Toxic Drain Punching through his team. Then we have a Leftovers Flash Fire Heatran. That can really just be a very good physically defensive wall here against, I'm guessing, a physical fire type. Taunt Toxic, just obnoxious, just an obnoxious set. We have an Avaya like Gligar. Now this thing, again, is a pretty good partner for Tyranitar. Being able to resist those fighting type hits really, really well, being fat and being able to U-turn. This is exactly what I was talking about with Whimsicott and Tornadus last team builder segment. This thing is another phenomenal partner for Tyranitar. It also helps out with Heatran too, of course, because otherwise we do have a little bit of a fighting weakness. But yeah, this thing can really come in on those fighting types, no problem. Those fighting types and ground types as well, no problem at all, and just pivot back out with a slow U-turn. Get Stealth Rocks up, and that's the other thing. When you draft Tyranitar, don't draft it as a Stealth Rocker. Draft other things that can get the rocks up. In this draft, I had Heatran, I had Gligar, and I possibly had one other that I can't remember. But that way you can run different Tyranitar sets. You're not forced to pigeonhole Tyranitar into being the Stealth Rock setter every week as it was in my week 1. It can do different things. So I really feel like Gligar or Gliscor are both fantastic. Gliscor especially as well, because that thing can, once you've got your Poison Heal activated, you can come in on Toxics, and you can also come in on Will-O-Wisps if you're already poisoned on your Gliscor, which is really, really nice to stop, say, Will-O-Wisps on Tyranitar. So again, I just feel like those two make a really nice pairing, thinking about from that defensive standpoint, how you're going to pivot around, and if you're playing on an offensive playstyle like me, not only how you're going to pivot in with defensive checks, but how you're going to regain momentum again with that U-turn, that slow switch out with Gligar back into one of your great wall breakers on your team. We then have a Triscarf Kartana, the best Kartana, fairly complex EV spread going on here. I don't know, probably not that complex to be fair, I don't know. And then we get onto the more fun Tyranitar set. This was a Shuckerberry. I did speak about Assault Vest, or I showed Assault Vest on the graphics slide for this, because I do think Assault Vest Tyranitar is really, really good, and if I was running Special Tyranitar, then I could see Assault Vest being a better version of this, but in this game, I particularly wanted to stop something with a Shuckerberry, so I was running Shuckerberry. I do think Resist Berry Tyranitar is my favorite Tyranitar, and this is just a max speed, max special attack, modest Tyranitar with Ancient Power, Dark Pulse, Earth Power, Ice Beam. that kind of edge quake coverage, you know, Stone Edge plus Earthquake, which it gets on the physical side, it also gets on the special side with Ancient Power, Earth Power, which is pretty cool, actually. Ancient Power, sure, isn't the strongest move at only 60, it's like running ahead in power, but it's okay, like, it's still okay, and Tyranitar special attack at 95 isn't pathetic, so this thing can still be run special. Ice Beam is really nice coverage. It also gets things like Flamethrower, Fire Blast, I think it gets Thunderbolt as well, that's what I was thinking of. And it also gets Surf too. So you get some really cool special coverage on this thing, and I think this thing can be a really fun special wall breaker, which is what I wanted to showcase with this replay here. A little bit more of a heat set, but still a very useful set. Then we have an Unaware Quagsire at the end. This team isn't very passive, so I wasn't overly worried about setup threats, but just in case, we do have an Unaware physically defensive Quagsire. I've got a feeling this was to help counter a either a Gyarados or a Mega Charizard X. You want to say a Gyarados? I don't know. We'll find out together when we watch the replay in just a second. So here we are with the second replay for Tyranitar for the special Tar in this game, and you can see that the Garchomp there is threatened by the Ice Beam. This is a Mega Morwell threatened by the Earth Power, Vikavolt threatened by the Ancient Power, Chestnut threatened by the Ice Beam, Necrozma threatened by the Dark Pulse, and Lycanroc threatened by the Earth Power as well. So we basically have super effective coverage for everything on his team, and super effective stab for 1-2 things on his team. So that's pretty nice. That shows you how good Tyranitar's special coverage is. Bolt Beam is always very good, but also having just like Rock and Dark, which is pretty decent coverage in of itself, is really, really nice. So I actually choose to lead off with Tyranitar here, wanting to pressure his potential hazard leads, because all 4 of them could think that they could set up hazards. Like you might think, oh, Garchomp, I can get a Rocks, he'll switch out. Mega Morwell, I could get a Rocks, he'll switch out, or I could go for an SD, he'll switch out. Necrozma, not so much admittedly, but Lycanroc again, maybe if you think, you know, I don't want to take a Drill Run or something, you might try and get your Rocks up if you're a Sash lead, something like that. So I really felt like Tyranitar just pressured really, really well as a lead in this game, and I'm just going to fire off the Ice Beam immediately. I'm not going to make any predictions, as my opponent does, expecting me to switch out, perfectly understandable, and I just fire off the Ice Beam here and Oko that thing. I don't think the crit mattered because we're max modest, but I'm not 100% sure. This was a long time ago. But you can see there instantly, my opponent sees a Tyranitar, thinks, okay, this is pretty safe to set up because he doesn't know if I'm Scarf, he might fear the Earthquake, I might be able to go for Rocks, it might whatever, he's just predicting me to switch out. I think because I was Sugar Berry on this set, so this is why I was running the Sugar Berry. You can see exactly why this was a lure for Garchomp. So even if he had Earthquake, I was fine just to stay in an Ice Beam, and he probably thinks, what's he going to do? Crunch me, Stone Edge me, Ice Fang me or something? With a special Ice Beam just ripping straight through that Garchomp, showing just how cool Special Tar can be. And at this point, he's in a pretty tough spot because he doesn't want to go into Chestnut on an Ice Beam. He doesn't want to go into Vikavolt on a Ancient Power. He doesn't want to go into this on a Dark Pulse, and he probably doesn't want to go into this particularly because now he might be concerned that I'm Sugar Berry on a Drill Run. So he kind of has to go into Morwile, and he has to do a land to play rough or risk the Iron Head, potentially not KOing me. I don't know if I could take an Iron Head. Maybe not. But it looks like he's probably going to need to go for play rough. No, he could Iron Head. He could probably Iron Head. But still, I'm forcing him to basically give me something slower than me to give me huge damage. So I am just going to fire off the Earth Power here, as we do huge damage, getting a second crit. Second crit. 2 crits in a row. But you can see there, even without the crit, we did, what, 92 with a crit. So, I don't know, we would have been doing, I don't know, what does that equal out at? About 70, 65? So we still would have put this thing way, way down. And we have essentially forced almost 2 KOs with Special Tyranitar just by catching him off guard. And this is really just what I wanted to showcase with Tyranitar a little bit, how creative you can get. You can do Rock Polish Weakness Policy, you can do Special, you can do AV, you can do Pursuit Trapping, you can do Resist Berry, Lures, exactly like this thing was. And this really shows how good a Resist Berry Lure can be, because it worked out to a T on that Garchomp, showing you why I love a Resist Berry Lure Tyranitar. I'll let the rest of the gameplay while I talk out. And this just puts me on the front foot initially. Like, I'm in a really good spot now where his 2 best offensive mons have already been really, really weakened. Showing here the kind of toxic Medicham. I'm a toxic player, what do you expect? And we can just pressure things here, and that's fine. But that shows you that even early on, how much Tyranitar... Oh, that's why I had physically defensive Heatran. Now we know for the Mega Morwell. It shows you how much Tyranitar could just really do, opening up this game for the rest of my mons. Again, I feel like Tyranitar isn't a mon that I use to get sweeps, and this is obviously my top 10, how I've used them, how they've made it onto my top 10. So you can see here why Tyranitar's differential was so low. I think it had a differential of +1, didn't it? Something like that. And its KOs per game was below 1 because it isn't doing huge numbers here. Here it only picked up 1 KO and then fainted to the Mawile. But what it really did is open doors. It's so good at taking out specific threats and being targeted and doing a really good supportive role for your sweepers to just go crazy, in this case Kartana. So yeah, I just wanted to showcase this and talk a little bit about a different kind of Tyranitar. Let's move on to the next one. Moving on now to number 7, and we've got a bit of a throwback here. This is the first mon on this list that I haven't used in a long time. I've relatively recently, Swellow to some extent. No, this thing's probably the first one that I haven't used in a really long time. I've only used Scolipede for one single season, ABC Season 2. This thing I think was robbed of the MVP. At the time, Mega Scissor was given MVP ahead of this thing, but when I looked back, this thing's stats were counted wrong as far as I can tell, so I think this thing was actually robbed, or maybe playoffs just weren't included. Either way, I think this thing actually would have got MVP this season. This was my first time ever posting up crazy numbers with a Pokemon, and these numbers were pretty crazy. 18 KOs, only 3 feints, a +15 differential in just 9 games, and a KO average of 2 KOs per game. You can see there I've just got the Poisonium Z as the item because I solely ran Z on this thing. I don't think I ran another item at all. I think it was only Z the whole season. Again, another one like Honchkrow that I mentioned earlier, where people seem to think it wants a life orb, but I really don't, because I feel like with that 89 defense and 69 SPDF, it's not massive, but if you position yourself properly, you can kind of take a hit from something, and then usually what you can do is not run Protect, and that's the crucial thing that I found with Scolipede versus Sharpedo, which didn't make this list. Could have made the list, but had only played 5 games, otherwise it might have made it on differential or something like that, but KOs per game I think it would have done, but still. The main difference for me between this and Sharpedo was that I never really wanted to run Protect on this thing. I just ran Swords Dance 3 attacks, and I felt like I could do that so easily. I felt like I could Swords Dance instead of Protecting. I could take one hit, and then I would sweep teams that didn't have good priority against me. And if I forced a switch, then even better. I'd get a free Swords Dance, and even if you did have some form of priority, I would still sweep you. It being resistant to Mach Punch and Vacuum Wave is pretty nice too, so that's one important form of priority that doesn't even hit it that hard. Its high base defense does mean that Fake Out isn't really bothering it too much, and they're going to have to probably switch out again, and they're just giving you a speed boost anyway. So yeah, I really think this thing is just a phenomenal late game cleaner. It KO'd 3 times, and one of those times that it fainted, I brought Poison Point by accident, so who knows, it could have got even more if I wasn't an idiot and brought Poison Point in one of the games. Yeah, this thing is just unreal. A phenomenal sweeper. Base 112 speed means it's so fast to begin with that even after +1 boost, you're outspeeding nearly all Scarfers, and that's something that I think is really incredible. The fact that you can outrun Scarfers without needing to set yourself up, you can change up moves, and people can't really run Scarfers to try and revenge kill you that easily. Yeah, I just think this thing is such a threat, so slept on. People seem to think that it's one of its best niches as being a Sash, Hazard Setting, Endure lead. Yeah, it can do that, but I never once did it with it, and I never once want to do it with Scolipede, because I think it is so much better than that. This thing was, of course, nicknamed Checkmate after Ben. Shout out to him. This was back in the days when I was still nicknaming things after my front office members. Now, I don't even pretend to like them anymore, so I don't bother. But regardless, I'm going to go into just one team, because I could only find one team. I tend to clear my team builder every few months, so I could only find one team that had Scolipede on it. But it illustrated pretty well how I use Scolipede, and the replay that we have was against someone pretty special too, so hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Yeah, let's break down Scolipede. So here we are with the team builder for Scolipede, guys, and as I said, we've only got one for this one because it is just going to be the one Z-Sex. That's all I really ran on it. This game was against Dreadful Dragonite, good friend of mine, absolute scrub. Shout out to him. He's been away for a while now, but yeah, good guy. I take any chance I can to talk about this game. This is pretty much my standard Scolipede. Max speed, jolly, don't run Adamant because then I don't have to run Protect. Bring it on to something you know you're faster than and you can Sword Stands up on, and at that point, unless they've got good priority, you win the game. It's as simple as that. This coverage plus Poison Jab basically means that you can hit everything but Steel and Rock types pretty well, maybe Ground types. Does ground resist poison? I feel like it does. Rock definitely does. Earthquake hits the ground and hits the rock and steel types for you anyway. Throat Chop hits those ghosts, which also resist poison. So it does have really good coverage to support its poison stab, which is why I didn't actually run Mega Horn on it all that much. People don't like missing Mega Horn, but I didn't run it that much. And then the Groundium Z to really nuke a big fat steel type if I need to. This thing is supported by Claydol, a terrible mon that I hardly ever brought, and I nicknamed Dread because I sniped it off him and then never brought it to any games. This was, I think, the only game of season I brought it to pretty much. I think it's rubbish. But in this game, this was a time where Dreadful Dragonite was using a lot of agility weakness policy metagrows. So to meme him, I wanted to bring a weakness policy sweeper of my own, and we decided to do it with Trick Room Keldeo, which I didn't even min speed on amusingly. I forgot to take the IVs out there, but it doesn't really matter. It's dread, he's a scrub. Mixed set with the Stone Edge on there for something, God knows what. But this thing is actually, as stupid as this seems, actually quite good to pair with Scolipede in terms of having a good ground type that can take the rock type hits through resisted damage, that can switch in on steel types and potentially break through them, but also a really good rapid spinner to get rid of hazards for Scolipede. Now, I didn't actually find I had to defog or spin for Scolipede much, because I found that once Scolipede was on the field, it was on the field and I never switched it out. I pretty much only brought it in when it was checkmate, when it was time to win. So I didn't actually feel like hazard removal was essential with Scolipede, but if your playstyle differs from mine slightly and you want to use this thing as more wall breaker, or you want to switch it in as a revenge killer, which it can do that, then yeah, then certainly having good removal is no bad thing. And I did draft good removal on this team. I just found that I didn't use Scolipede in that way. I only used Scolipede as a late game cleaner, as evidenced by the fact that it fainted so few times in the games it was brought to. Next up, we have Megalopony. And Megalopony made a phenomenal partner to Scolipede, because Megalopony feeds on steel types, it feeds on rock types, and of course it can kind of pressure ghost types too with the scrappy, meaning that it isn't walled by them either. So this thing just breaks through all three things that Scolipede is kind of checked by really, really well. Similarly, this thing doesn't like bulky psychic or bulky fairies. Guess who loves hitting Megahorn into bulky psychics and who loves hitting poison jab into bulky fairies? So you can see here, these two perfectly break each other's checks. If something beats Pamela, it doesn't beat checkmate. And if something beats checkmate, it doesn't beat Pamela. So those two together just combine really well. Healing Wish is also nice support for something like the Scolipede if you want to be able to get it in a few times. I didn't find that I ever really used it like that, but it was just an option. The final thing that I had in this team, which I don't get to showcase here in the team builder, but was a Hydreigon. So to talk back to the Porygon-Z team builder, we spoke about how Altaria pressured steel types physically and Porygon-Z pressured them specially. What Hydreigon did as the kind of third wheel in this team, let me just get up Hydreigon here. Hydreigon was able to just run like choice specs, say with Dark Pulse, Draco Meteor, and Yuta. Let's say something like that, right? Why do these three work so well together? Well, if you drop that Draco Meteor into a physically defensive steel type designed to be able to take hits from Scolipede, suddenly it's not taking it very well on the special side. You know, we have 125 special attack here if we're running choice specs, and this is a 130 base power move. So this is just really strong stab, really strong base stats, really good wall breaker to pressure steel types on the special side. If you want to go into your Fairy, which is physically defensive to take on Pamela, you're not going to take the Specs Dark Pulse that very well because you haven't invested in your special defense. So this thing, basically, the two of the things that walled these, it also beats bulky psychics for Pamela as well, and it is I feel like it did something else. Oh, and it beats the ghosts for Scolipede. It can come in on ghosts and it can come in on psychics. So it can come in on the other two things that these can't beat, and it can pressure them really nicely as well with Dark Pulse. So it breaks the remaining things that these things don't necessarily break super well between them, although they kind of do already. And it also pressures on the special side the two things that these pressure on the physical side. Do you see what I'm getting at? So maybe the only thing is like a psychic type, for example, you could build physically defensive, and that isn't really pressured here. It does lose to both of these, but it doesn't have to have any spadef to try and switch in on these, is what I'm trying to say. There are things like that where there is slight things that you can do, slight checks that you can build, but you can imagine if you had, say, Mega Alakazam on your team, you need to build your Fairy to be bulky physically to switch in on Megalopony. Alright, well then, what do you build specially defensive to switch in on Hydreigon? Alright, you need to bring your Steel as a Shukaberry Fizdef set to stop my Groundium Z +2 Scolipede sweeping you. Well then, what do you bring specially defensive to switch in on Hydreigon? So really, these three together were able to just tear teams apart, able to really spread around the checks and spread them too thin to really wall the three. And then on this particular team composition, we also were running double regenerator core. Basically, just pivot around. T-Wave is super, super nice to support these mons. And just basically be obnoxious. If you get hazards up, we've got a really reliable hazard setter here. Get hazards up, switch around between your regen core for 20 turns, then everything is in range of Scolipede. That was really how I played this team, was basically just switched around a lot, picked up a couple of revenge kills here and there with Lopunny and Hydreigon. Although Hydreigon I used a lot as a pivot. I quite like bulky Hydreigon, so I would bring it more like this kind of a lot, because I'm disgusting like that. I would bring this kind of a set quite a lot. But you could run something like this and just basically pivot around, get momentum back, pivot around, get momentum back, revenge kill, make sure your hazards up, everything's chipped down. Goodbye. Scolipede is going to sweep through you, and let's have a look at how that played out against Dreadful Dragonite. So here we are with the game, guys, and I spoke about not really liking Wallbreaker Scolipede, preferring to use it as a kind of late game cleaner. That's just my preference on how to use it. So I'm going to use Claydol here as a Wallbreaker, even though I wanted to kind of sweep him with Claydol. I'm actually going to try and use that as the kind of Wallbreaker in this team. What I need to do is I need to pressure the Metagross because that is his main form of priority. Other than that, he has no real good priority. He could have Quick Attack on Terrakion and Extreme Speed on Raikou, but they're not really good. And other than that, I outspeed his whole team. I've got to figure out what the Scarfer is, because maybe at +1 I can't outspeed, say, Scarf Raikou, but other than that, something like Scarf Terrakion can't even outspeed me at +1, so that shows you why Scarf Revenge Killers just aren't reliable for this thing at all. Maybe Scarf Sceptile with Rock Slide or something could be a bit of a pain, but yeah, not too much. And his Bulky Ghost and Ground, which would be a decent poison / bug immunity, resist, sorry, which is why we brought the Throat Chop, goes down early, showing that Lopunny there really pressuring that Ghost type. Maybe he forgot about Scrappy, I don't know. I think I stay in here and let him have this because I feel bad and click Fake Out. Yeah, I do. Because he missed the first one. So anyway, we're going to pivot out into Nico here and get our rocks up, I believe. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because we can kind of see what's going on here as he goes for the agility, as we go for the Trick Room, pops our weakness policy. Oh, it's so nice. And start blitzing through his team because he didn't have to Mega Evolve. Stupid rule. Whose rule was that? Our Hidden Power Ice didn't KO, and I didn't know at this point that Claydol got Ice Beam. Shows you how much I hate Claydol. If we'd had Ice Beam, we would have pretty much guaranteed another KO there and just absolutely ran through him. But now under Trick Room, I actually outspeed his Mega Sceptile. So that's pretty fun, actually. As we just go for the Swords Dance, and he goes for a Swords Dance. Misplay from him. He needed to attack me there if he could. But now we're at Swords Dance and we're at +2 speed. This is really showing you how good Scolipede can be. We go for the Earthquake, and again, I spoke about his bulk in the team builder, or in the graphics section. We took that Thunderbolt from Sash Raikou. Now, admittedly, it is only Sash Raikou, but it does look like it's probably Rash as it's shiny. It might be Rash with Aura Sphere. So it might be special attack boosting, and we did take it pretty healthily. So it kind of shows you here, yes, if he'd attacked me with Sceptile, I would have gone down, so it was misplayed by him. I wouldn't have got as many KOs as I did, but I still would have revenge killed the Sceptile and put this Raikou down to its Sash, and if he wasn't Sash Raikou in the first place, or I'd got my rocks up, then I would have just clean swept anyway, and here we can fire off the Groundium into a potential Shuka Berry Terrakion, and the +2, we're going to decimate it. So this really shows you the power of Checkmate here. Once you've just blown through a couple of things, Scolipede can just come in, Swords Dance up, and it does take that hit. Like I said, that neutral hit from a strong Mon. Raikou is not a passive Mon, but it took that neutral hit really, really well. You kind of do need to have super effective coverage or stab to Oko this thing, or just be a phenomenally strong Mon. So yeah, this is why I feel like you don't need Focus Sash on Scolipede, you don't need Protect on Scolipede, you just need to position it really, really carefully, and you can just sweep games there. Even if he had attacked with the Sceptile, it's worth noting when I Swords Danced under Trick Room, I would have then outsped him the next turn, which is why I was happy to do that. And I would have clean swept his team if he wasn't Sash Raikou, which was not what I was expecting. So it really shows you, yeah, I just think Scolipede is such an incredible Mon, and with that offensive core that I drafted around it, there just weren't many teams that could deal with it. This only took 17 turns, and it shows you by just using Claydol to wall break and chip things down, everything was then just in range of Scolipede, and I knew that. I built this set knowing, alright, I need some chip to put this thing in range of Throat Chop, and I need to make sure that this thing is been worn down as well, which is exactly what Claydol did for me. So yeah, pretty fun stuff. Other than that, it just had matchup from the beginning and went crazy. And that was the thing. You may notice Scolipede only came to, I think, like 9 games or 8 games. That's because it doesn't have matchup every week. There are some weeks where you look at it and you're like, all right, I'd have to remove 4 things on my opponent's team to make Scolipede do anything. It's just not going to be worth it. So I do think that it's a little bit of like a luxury Mon a little bit. It's not going to have matchup every week, but when it does, it's like irresistible. It just wins on its own. It's just 6-0s, and it's just incredible. Yeah, I love this thing. Absolutely love this thing. Regardless, let's move on to the next Mon. And now, moving on to the final Mon today. Number 6 spot, we have Keldeo, the good doggo, the best doggo. Look at this thing. It gets a bad reputation as a bad donkey, as a bad horse. It's not. It's a good doggo. Keldeo is one of the most divisive Pokemon in the Draft League community, in my opinion. It has such a bad special move pool that a lot of people give it a lot of hate, but I tend to disagree. I think that most people that like Keldeo really like Keldeo, and they'll keep drafting it and keep drafting it, and those people that hate it just hate it. Physical Keldeo is not a set, no matter how much people try and make it happen. I know it's heat, I know it seems cool to run Physical Keldeo. I tried it a couple of times here and there in mocks, and it never made it to the actual game because it's terrible. But yeah, this thing has been a very good servant to me with 19 KOs and only 12 feints in 18 games. So not posting up huge KOs per game number with only a 1.06, but a nice differential with +7, and still averaging more than a KO per game. So it isn't solely in here on the fact that I've drafted it in the NPL tryouts and then again in OWL. I just think this thing is a super reliable way of just guaranteeing 1 KO. With its speed tier, you can run its Scarf. With its powerful 129 special attack, you can run its Specs, and I also like to run its Z with Calm Mind or Substitute. I think that's pretty good. I will get more into movesets when we analyze it properly, but it does do things like Taunt too, which I think is pretty nice, and Icy Wind actually is a very underrated move in my opinion. Yeah, I just think this thing gets way too much hate. I find the best way to play it is kind of use it very aggressively. Just get yourself 1, maybe 2 KOs in a game, and then let it go down. You don't need to preserve it super long. But I mean, you can see here from the fact that it survived through 6 of the 18 games that it came to, 1/3 of the games that it came to, that it does tend to stick around, that it does do okay. But yeah, let's break down properly some of the sets that I've brought before, and let's talk about, this was actually a really hard one to do because there were so many games when I was looking for replays of Keldeo where it was just getting 1 KO here, 1 KO there, and I was like, this isn't like a super great way for me to showcase it. A lot of these mons, like Scolipede, I could just show you a replay where I ran through 4 mons with Scolipede. But this thing is like, how do I find replays that really illustrate how valuable just picking up 1 KO is? So I've tried to kind of showcase some different sets with it a little bit. Let's talk about those. Let's break down Keldeo. So here we are with the final team builder segment. Well, not quite the final. We're going to come back, of course, after this replay to do a second team builder segment with Keldeo, but still, the final mon that we're doing team builders with here with Keldeo. This one was the hardest one. This one, of all the mons I had to showcase, like I said, Keldeo was just so damn hard to find replays that showed you everything that I wanted to show you, because I just feel like Keldeo, it does things that like are hard to demonstrate. It just picks up little KOs here and there, picks up a little bit of damage. But anyway, I'm going to try and showcase it here. So this was a team that I drafted in the Surge. If you don't know what the Surge format is, you only draft a maximum of 8 mons. You basically change after each game, like up to 2 mons. So it was pretty fast changing and fast evolving team. We did it after every 2 games though, and I didn't change my team a whole great deal. You're going to see a bunch of Surge teams throughout this and the next video, I would think, because there's a few mons that I drafted in the Surge that are favorites of mine. So regardless, you can see here Honchkrow mentioned in the honorable mentions. You're going to get to see a Honchkrow set, which is pretty fun. But why did this team work really well? Well, Nidoqueen for starters. I've used this thing quite a lot, and I really like the Life Orb, Speedy, Sheer Force set more than like a defensive set, which makes me just think I'd rather have Nidoking, but hey, that's just my opinion. It doesn't do too much to support Keldeo, really. It can have coverage to beat down bulky waters with things like Thunderbolt and stuff, but that isn't really its main draw, nor do I think it's best kind of what am I trying to say? Its best thing that it does to support Keldeo. What I think it does really well to support Keldeo is being a very good electric immunity. Obviously, to revenge kill Keldeo, I do think you will see a lot of fast electric types. This is the thing, when you draft something like a fast water or a fast flyer that you're going to be using in one of your main offensive mons, expect to see fast electric types, because the other types that revenge kill you aren't that speedy naturally a lot of the time. So for example, flying type, bit of a mixed bag, but a lot of teams have a defensive flying type over something like Mandibuzz, something like Mantine, something like Skarmory, something like Celesteela. These aren't going to be mons that revenge kill a Keldeo, so those teams are going to look towards their faster things like a Raikou, like a Mega Manectric, like a Zeraora, like a Tapu Koko. So when you're running something like Keldeo, you do want a really good ground immunity. It is really important, because you're going to find that people, when they're team building, good team builders will think, okay, so if Keldeo claims a KO, how do I revenge kill it, and how do I build around that? So that's where I think Nidoqueen does do really well with Keldeo, and if it gets to come in for free, what Nidoqueen does is it does wall break pretty well. It does wall break pretty well, but even better what it does when it comes in for free to support Keldeo is it just gets up hazards. It has double hazards here, so you can really pressure things to support your Keldeo. This game was, I believe, a quarterfinal match against Gallade, I think this was. So this was a pretty big game, pretty important game. against a pretty good player, but I knew that with this set in particular, or with this team build in particular, I had a really good way of supporting everything that I was running on the team. Next up, we have Ernest, the Bronzong. Again, this thing doesn't, it's not like it pairs hugely well, massively well with Keldeo, but what it is a very good Spadef Steel type. So you could take a number of Spadef Steel types in this slot, just like you could take a number of bulky grounds in this slot. You know, change this out for Hippowdon, maybe. Change this out for maybe Excadrill, maybe some things like that too. But these two in particular are really, really good bulky, especially bulky mons in their typing, and they also do really well at getting hazards up and getting good team support. Bronzong is a little bit worse than Nidoqueen in terms of it's a bit more passive, where Nidoqueen can wall break with a set like this thing can't, but still having that good steel to take those flying type revenge killers like a Mega Pidgeot, like a Tornadus T. Those are the two primary typings that you're going to see trying to revenge kill you. You might see some fast psychics too, and then having a 4x psychic resist is really good. This thing doesn't do a whole lot back to psychic types, which is why I say that it isn't like the perfect Keldeo partner. Something like Metagross that could Pursuit Trap them could arguably be better, but I don't think it hurts. I don't think it hurts having a 4x Psychic Resist to pair with it too and a good Flying Resist. So yeah, we're running Heat Proof in this game for a Noivern, I remember. As it happens, Noivern gets Shadow Ball. Didn't know that. Assumed it would be Flamethrower or Fire Blast, so we ran Heat Proof. But yeah, pretty standard Bronzong. Just gets Rocks up, which really supports Nidoqueen very well. Takes the Rocks pressure, Hazard's pressure off Nidoqueen, meaning it can Wall Break with the Sheer Force Life Orb set. Then we have a Flame Charge Blaziken. This thing's crazy. Special Blaziken, basically designed to just blow through. Titanium-Z Focus Blast was for a Quagsire, I believe, just to nuke that thing and run train on my opponent's team. Double Fighting type is something that I will get to talk about a little bit. Hopefully as we go on throughout this and the next video. Double Fighting type, I believe, is a fantastic thing to have in the draft format. I've drafted it on Surge. I've drafted it in... have it in Owl? I don't think I had it in Owl, but I did have it in Surge. I did have it in PGBL right now. I did have it in UBL. And I think I'd possibly had it before UBL as well. I think the double fighting type is so hard to resist, especially if you can get them that hit on different sides. Hit one physical and one special, or just mixed. And that's something that I really want to talk about. So, Blaziken is able to hit on the physical or special side. You really don't know how this thing's going to be. Yes, Swords Dance is its premier set, but it can use its 110 special attack very well, because high base power moves in 110 and 120 means that this thing does hit really hard on the special side, especially with Z moves. Flame Charge means you can boost up your speed, even though it's of course speed boost banned. So you can still run Train on a team, and I can run Modest because I am boosting my speed here. What this does really well with Keldeo is that Keldeo hits on the physical type side with its Secret Sword, but then it also hits on the special side with its Water Stab. So Keldeo makes it really difficult for Keldeo switch-ins to say, hey, you know, if you're running a Vaporeon, for example, you nearly always run a physically defensive Vaporeon for a Keldeo, because you're like, I can take its Water Stab, right? That's not a problem. I need to be able to take its Fighting Stab. Okay, so you're going to bring your physically defensive Vaporeon. Well, how are you going to take my specially offensive Blaziken with Titanium-Z? In this game, Quagsire. Alright, if you're going to bring a water-absorbed Quagsire to try and take on my Keldeo, then how are you suddenly going to take a Focus Blast Titanium-Z? Because you're physically defensive to try and take those Secret Swords. You don't have the special defense investment. So it's a really, really nice thing where these two pair really nicely. And Keldeo is this weird thing where it's like a special attacker that's also a physical attacker. And then some weeks you can just run Focus Blast on there as well to really screw things up. So yeah, really, really interesting pairing, and this thing can do, I think it works really well with Blaziken as well, because I like to have one slow, one fast, one wall breaker, one cleaner. So I think these two make a really phenomenal pair, and I couldn't recommend them together highly enough. Moving on next, we have some nice priority to kind of support Keldeo, but also we have a Tailwind set. This is really, really important, I think, because Keldeo, the set that we're running Specs on this team. I think I should have said that earlier, sorry. The Specs Keldeo that we're running on this team isn't going to be super fast. So getting it under Tailwind means that it's just going to do huge damage and be really, really fast. I do think Tailwind support can be super nice for Keldeo, but I don't think it's essential. Just like Sticky Web is really nice because it means that a lot of Scarfers won't even outspeed you, but it isn't essential. But with the priority on here, with this being completely immune to psychic types and having very different weaknesses to Bronzong. You know, you can't just Shadow Ball me if you're a psychic type, because I've got 2 different psychic resists here. You can't just Thunderbolt me because it's not going to do too much to Ernest being Spadef. You know, these 2 do pair relatively nicely. Having a good Dark type and a good Steel type does work really, really nice with Keldeo, and of course on a double fighting team it becomes even more important. So yeah, Honchkrow on a offensive side of things, it does kind of break through those bulky psychics that Keldeo can't break through, so we are pressuring them really well with these 2 here, but then we're also breaking them with Honchkrow, so that's really nice. I believe this was Wakamberry to lure a Zeraora, which is why we have all this defense, and then essentially just KO it with Night Slash, or Tailwind up on it, and then Night Slash it, something like that. But in general, yeah, these things do pair pretty nicely together. They do pressure Fairy types, and again, now Fairy types are really, really torn, because it's like, if they go physically defensive to try and take on my Honchkrow and my Keldeo, taking that Secret Sword, then they're not going to really appreciate taking a Hydro Pump. If they go specially defensive, then they're not going to appreciate taking a Brave Bird. So again, these 3 together, having that Dark type, I mean, that Dark fighting Psychic, right, is an offensive core that's been spoken about for a long, long time. And having double fighting plus Dark as an offensive core is really, really hard to deal with, and that's kind of showcased on this build here. So anyway, let's move on to the choice specs Keldeo. We are running a Scald Hydro Pump, double Water Stab. I do run Surf on it sometimes, but in this case, I liked the burn chance for certain things that might want to switch in on me otherwise. I think specifically the Noivern, being able to burn the Noivern and just get residual damage with rocks and stuff as well. Felt like it could be super, super nice rather than risking missing Hydro Pump, and rather than just a raw damage output of Surf. I felt like the percentage difference between a Scald and a Surf into a Noivern was relatively small, whereas the residual burn chip just meant that that thing would be really a lot more pressured with residual damage every time it comes in, and rocks and everything else. Secret Sword is really, really nice, and of course I can make the prediction just go for the Icy Wind and decimate those bulky dragon flying types like Salamence, like Noivern, that otherwise want to take me on. This thing's special coverage is no secret that it's terrible. If we sort it by power, you've got Hyper Beam, Focus Blast, Hydro Pump, Surf, Secret Sword, Scald, Bubble Beam, and then Hidden Powers. You only have Stab and Hyper Beam over the Hidden Power base power, which is pretty, really poor, and then even below it you just have Icy Wind, so I mean, and Round and stuff. But yeah, its special coverage is horrific, but I really feel like that's kind of okay. It doesn't depend on its special coverage for me. It depends on its stab, and it uses its stab so well, and you can build around it so easily that I think that's just fine. And this is the other thing that I wanted to sort of comment on with Keldeo, is that this thing actually is naturally really bulky. 91 HP, 90 defense, and 90 speed def. Once you start investing into those, that is nothing to sniff at, which means you can play this thing really, really aggressively. For example, 91, 90, 90, let's look at Nidoqueen. 90, 87, 85. This thing is noticeably bulkier than a Nidoqueen. We think of Nidoqueen as being this really, really bulky ground type. We don't think of Keldeo as being a bulky water, but in a way it is. You can kind of pivot in on fire types aggressively. You can kind of pivot in on rock types aggressively. Water fighting is actually a decent defensive typing. You resist quite a lot in rocks, fire, other waters, ice types, and you pressure ice types with your fighting stab, you pressure rock types with your fighting stab. You know, there's so many things that you can kind of steel type you resist with your water and then pressure back with your fighting. It is just a really, really good typing. So yeah, I feel like Keldeo's typing and its bulk is really underrated, and I feel like people play it wrong because of that. They don't realize how much you can bring it hard in on things, how much you can just raw switch into this thing and then apply a ton of offensive pressure with like a spec set like this. And we are running Modest here, just so that I can do as much damage as possible. And then last up on this team, we do have Storm the Whimsicott. Again, that Tailwind support, double Tailwind on this team, really just to support my double fighting type so that we can really break through this team. U-turn to get Keldeo in if we want to go that route. This thing basically can come in on those Draco Meteors as well as this, so that I don't only have one Draco Meteor switch in from that Noivern. And it basically just is another thing that then pressures Noivern offensively with a Moonblast. Obviously, he does outspeed me potentially, I think. 116. I think Noivern's faster than that, isn't it? 123, yeah it is. So he does potentially outspeed me, but he might want to not run a risk to Scarf or the Prankster Stun Spore or something like that. So you can really see here how this thing can support the team well as well. I do think good team support mons like these three pair with Keldeo super, super nicely. Anyway, let's check out the replay and see how it all worked out. So here we are in the game, guys, and let's see exactly how Keldeo got on in this. Like I say, I think this is a quarter-final match, and you can see here my opponent's team composition. Even at team preview, Keldeo beats this with Secret Sword, beats this with Secret Sword, and resists this thing, stab, resists this thing, stab. Can break through this thing if it's potentially running physically defensive. If it's potentially running specially defensive, then we can break through this thing. Yeah, right, this is a problem, admittedly. Don't know what typing this is yet, and this is a thing that we're probably going to be able to break through. And why do we want to break through this thing? Well, it also helps out our other fighting types. So you can see here the kind of two working together. As he reveals the Never-Ending Nightmare, doesn't do too much because Bronzong is a fat bitch. Bronzong is huge. We can just go for the Protect here, and we're back over 50% wild, and Noivern is very weak. We've got our Rocks up, which is super, super nice. We fire off a Toxic there, hoping to catch the Noivern and just chip it down. It doesn't quite work out as well as we would have wanted, but we can fire off a Psywave, slowly wear this thing down, and now I'm just going to go into Nidoqueen. Help support the team, basically. Lure out the Silvally, which is really, really nice to know what typing this thing is as he goes for the Psychic. I don't know, into the Silvally Psychic, I don't know exactly what he was predicting there, as I did just go for the Earth Power. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what he was predicting. Maybe a double or something. I'm not quite sure. But either way, we're just going to take out the Silvally because I don't want a bulky Psychic type sticking around for my double Fighting Core, like I've already said. So you can see here, just the team kind of working out quite well. Again, having a bulky Steel coming in on that Ice type, pretty nice. Sack it off though. And now Keldeo gets in, and suddenly Rocks are up. We've got a Spec Secret Sword coming my opponent's way, and that does 43%. So you can see here, we're just able to basically just pivot around a little bit, make sure hazards are up, and then just start doing damage. And we actually stay in here predicting the Roost, losing his flying typing, and just firing off another Spec Secret Sword and destroying that Noivern. The reason that I felt safe kind of staying in is because even if he Hurricaned me, one, he had to land his Hurricane. But two, I probably take the Hurricane. I'm a Keldeo. Like, again, talking about that natural bulk, I would probably tank it. And three, even if he, like, crit KO'd me or something like that, right? He's now down at a really low range of health where he can't really come back in on Rocks very easily. I prevent him from roosting, and if he makes the aggressive play there, predicting me to switch out to Roost, then he just gets demolished. So, kind of shows you there exactly what this thing can do. And here we go into our Grass type. Again, this is one thing that I probably didn't say enough about Whimsicott, is that having a bulky Grass type that can come in on those electric Revenge Killers and click U-turn is really, really nice for if your Nidoqueen, your bulky ground gets worn down, as it did in this match, because we actually just get up our Tailwind there, and then U-turn out into the Nidoqueen, as this thing just exerted more pressure. But I could just as easily there have gone into Keldeo and tried to run through him with Keldeo. It was really one or the other. Here I go out into Blaziken because I love Blaziken. And again, I could have just... I could have done this with Keldeo. It could have gone either way. It just shows you that basically that when that electric type came out to try and revenge kill my Keldeo, it put me in a phenomenal position with my team support Whimsicott, because it was able to get me behind a Tailwind to get my... Blaziken set up to get all these KOs that it's just ran through, and basically put me in a point where between Nidoqueen and Blaziken, his thing has to Zeraora has to solo my team essentially. We get off another Tailwind, and then in comes Specs Keldeo to finish off the game. Like I say, that was probably not the best description in the world, but you've got to bear in mind, like, for example, that's Zeraora. That's a neutral hit, not a super effective hit, and Zeraora probably had a ton of bulk in this game because I didn't have anything fast on my team that he had speed creep. So again, it's just kind of showing you that Spec Secret Sword is just going to decimate anything. Like, anything frail, or even just not outright bulky, like that Noivern, for example, resisted it, it still got destroyed. It shows you that the team support by having a good Grass that can get you momentum, and can come in on those revenge killing electric types is really, really nice. It shows you that having a bulky Steel that can come in on those flying types like Noivern, get up Rocks and pressure those flying types is really, really nice. So this is me just trying to show that whilst Keldeo, you know, it didn't do a lot, it got 2 KOs in this game, and you can argue like, you know, that's not insane. I want to show you how those pieces really work together in this match to really just come through and win this game relatively comfortably in the end because of how well they supported each other. Let's move on to the next team builder and talk about a very, well, not a very different, but a slightly different Keldeo set. So here we are with the actual final team builder of this video. This video has got to be over an hour at this point, I'm sure. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't realize it was going to be this long. Hopefully you guys appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm sure a lot of you have just skipped through to see what the top 5 were and then skipped off. But if you're enjoying this detailed analysis, and if you've made it this far and you're actually watching the analysis, just tell me down below, like, I actually enjoyed the analysis, please, because it would really mean a lot at this point. Like, this is going to be a tough order to do this for... turn these videos around as quickly as I have to for 10 months. But anyway, I feel like I've begged for likes so much in this video and comments so much. I feel awful, but at the same time, like... yeah, I've worked harder than I usually do. I'm not a hard worker. Regardless, this was a game in Owl where we're using Keldeo. This was a hugely important game. I won't talk about it too much because I might upload Owl, but another very important game. We had a physically defensive Hippowdon. So again, I spoke about in the last team builder segment, all about having that really good ground type to support you to take on those electric types. So we have a really good one here in Hippowdon. I do think Nidoqueen is marginally better, but with Stealth Rock, Whirlwind, Slack Off, we're able to not be too passive with the Whirlwind. We're able to get hazards up just like Bronzong did in the last game to pressure those flying types, and we're able to support Good Doggo relatively well. Not super well, but relatively well. Next up, we have Mega Latios, which actually is missing the nickname. I wonder if I had the nickname in the game. I'm going to assume I didn't. So let's put that in now. Yeah, as we had Mega Latios here with the Draco, Meteor, Psychic, Earthquake, Hidden Power, Fire. This set was designed to break through his team modest max special attack, redesigned to do as much damage to his team as possible. It does complement Keldeo relatively well in terms of the both pressuring fairies together, and Keldeo being pretty good with dark types. You can come in, for example, on like a Crunch or something pretty well with Keldeo, and if Keldeo is Z, then those dark types can't really click knock off against the Mega Lati anyway because it doesn't have an item, but even if they were, they couldn't knock off your Z, so that is pretty nice on Keldeo, and this is Z Keldeo. So that Alolan Muck, for example, that's in this game, I don't know if it's going to be running Crunch or if it's going to be running knockoff, but I can pivot in pretty well to it with my Keldeo pairing pretty nicely here together. As I say, they do both pressure the fairy types together, which is really, really nice, and to some extent bulky psychics, right? Keldeo loves having bulky psychics taken care of, and Mega Lati doesn't hate it either, although they're not the best check. Dark types are somewhat better. There is some synergy in this offensive core. This was a Fightinium Z taunt set, basically, like I said, designed to beat that Alolan Muck, which otherwise is going to be a real pain for this team. Max special attack, near max speed, a little bit of bulk, but with just that little bit of bulk, we can still switch in on that Alolan Muck. We can still pressure it really, really well. Scald is super nice so that I can potentially burn things, and I can potentially click that against the Muck anyway. It could be one of those mid-ground plays where it's like, alright, well, I can click Secret Sword here, and my opponent could switch out, which wouldn't get me too much, or I can Scald, and even if he stays in, I'm still going to burn the Muck, potentially, which is really, really nice. Hydro Pump, of course, just powerful stab, if I want to click a high base power move. I think his main switch-in was a Starmie, which is a real pain, but we'll get onto why that's a real pain and how you can support that. So next up, we have Keanu Reeves with a Choice Scarf in this game. A really nice Choice Scarf to pair with this thing, because this thing does beat the Steel types that maybe Choice Scarf Porygon doesn't love. It can also bust through the Rock types that this thing doesn't love. So these two do make a pretty nice call when I'm talking about one beating the other one's checks. These two do kind of do that a little bit. Those Bulky Waters don't love taking Tri-attacks from an Adaptability Porygon, and they are probably the best check to Keldeo just about. So yeah, there is some synergy here, and Trick, of course, being able to break through those walls, which is pretty nice for the whole team, but especially for Porygon. Moving on to the next one here, and now this is a thing, especially for Keldeo, this is the one that really pairs very, very well with Keldeo, because Keldeo hates bulky waters. They are probably the best check to Keldeo just about, although sometimes you can set up on them if they're quite passive. Something like Milotic, for example, you can easily Calm Mind up on a Milotic if it isn't Haze or Dragon Tail, which is pretty nice, and if it is Dragon Tail, you can sub up on it. So there are various things you can do with Keldeo to abuse bulky waters, but this thing pressures bulky waters as well. So it isn't perfect because Secret Sword being physical, I would say if you want to pressure a bulky water, you should run Focus Blast, because that way you can basically hit the bulky water on the special side if they're running physically defensive to take the ice type hits from Weavile, but you can also knock off their leftovers. There are quite a lot of bulky waters, such as like Blastoise, for example, that don't get recovery. They're dependent on their leftovers, so knocking off those leftovers is pretty huge. The second thing that makes this such a good pairing, I mean, the Psychic Dark fighting trio I've already spoken about, that core I've already spoken about, but the other thing that this thing does really nice is Pursuit Trapping, because one of the things that this thing does not like in the meta is things like Starmie, which I've just mentioned, Slowbro, Slow King, those bulky psychics that can be a bit of a pain. Well, here we have a very good Pursuit Trapper to trap them, which I didn't have on the other team, particularly because I was running Honchkrow. This is something that Weavile does a little bit better than Honchkrow can do here with that Choice Band Pursuit. Basically, this set can just force a situation where I have to take the Starmie from him. And at that point, Keldeo really opens up to go crazy in this game. The nice priority as well to support Keldeo against those flying types. And again, this is something where they both pressure water types, but they can also beat one another's checks. So this can beat the flying types for this, and this thing can beat the... Well, they both pressure fairies as well. I'm sure there's... Oh, this can beat the steel types that would otherwise resist Ice-type hits. So again, there's this nice little triangle of an offensive core forming between these two and their Dark and Ice stabs with the Water and Fighting. They actually both pair pretty well together. Weavile and Keldeo is an awesome offensive core, one that was recommended to me by Eric and Isaac a long time ago, so shout out to them for that. Last up, we have a Trapping Decidueye, relatively physically defensive. This was specifically to stop hazards from Ferrothorn. It's not too much to do with Keldeo, but again, it is a mon that with the U-turn and the Grass typing can come in on electric types that are supposed to revenge kill you. Take the electric type hit very, very well. If they then switch out, you U-turn and you regain momentum. So, like I said, having a U-turn in Grass type, I feel like is an awesome thing to have with Keldeo. I've had it on both of these teams, and I feel like it just works super, super well. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump into the final replay we have to analyze. So here we are with the game, guys, to showcase the Titanium-Z Keldeo. And the really nice thing about Titanium-Z Keldeo that I forgot to say in the Team Builder section is that whilst you are running that Secret Sword on the physical side, once you click the Z move, it actually becomes a special attack rather than a physical attack, which is the way that Secret Sword works. So that's another really cool thing with the Z moves on Keldeo. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about this game. So this is against Jack, who was on one of the best teams in OWL, and frankly, I think he and Eric had the two best records in the regular season of OWL. So this is, yeah, this guy is about as good as it gets. I think he was in like the DPL and stuff. He's a very impressive player. Definitely a tough opponent. As Keanu Reeves just switches out here from the muck, getting in Keldeo, and I'm talking there exactly about how you can get Keldeo in really, really nicely on those Dark types. Now, as it happened, he Pursuit trapped me there, but had he gone for the knockoff, it really wouldn't have mattered to Keldeo. It would have been just fine. Here we make the double into Weavile, hoping to try and trap this Starmie, and that's exactly what happens. Here I'm just going to go for the knockoff. I did see a lot of Colberberry Thunderwave in my mocks. And I didn't want him to be able to just recover off my pursuits. So that's why we go straight for the knockoff there, revealing that we are banded, so he will switch out this turn and into his Fizz Def Mega Medicham, which is pretty crazy. But we've shown already that that is the main Keldeo check, and it's now at 50%. If I can play well enough to pressure that thing and keep it at 15%, I've just gone into my Sand Setter and got my Sand up, so it can't come in right now. I'm going to be able to get my Rocks up, but it can't do too much about that. Then suddenly Keldeo is looking really, really good in this game. And we can go out into Decidueye here. Hopefully he isn't Spikes and I don't have to defog, and we can just Spirit Shackle him in as he goes for the Gyro Ball and does nothing. And we're in a pretty nice spot now, right? The Keldeo is pretty free to spam moves against that team because the Starmie has already been worn down and he doesn't really have great switches. As Muck comes in and does reactivate his Berry. If you're wondering why the Ferrothorn was able to switch out after we Spirit Shackled it, it's because unfortunately it was a Shed Shell set because I had a Magnezone on this team, as he is able to Pursuit trap my Decidueye and get a little bit more chip off, but back in comes Keldeo, and every time he Pursuit traps, it means Keldeo stays at a good range of health. And now I can fire off the Z. He might think that he can take the Secret Sword depending on his investment, but he can't take the Z move, and that just shows the power of Keldeo. As the Starmie is just going to come back out now and be able to recover up being faster than me, there isn't too much I can do about it. I can't hit it for enough damage to stop it from recovering, but I can go back into Weavile on this turn, as it's essentially forced to recover or Psychic or make a prediction. And if it did any of those things and it killed my Weavile, then I could potentially get in Latios to hit it anyway. If it's Psychic, it wouldn't do too much. And here I force a really difficult turn, and this turn took a long, long time because I basically, am I going to Pursuit Trap him? Am I going to knock off? What am I going to do? He's forced to make a difficult prediction, as I actually opt to just knock off and luckily don't get paralyzed, predicting him to just stay in and hope to 2-hit KO me. As I thought that was his best play. Anyway, that has shown you why Weavile and Z Keldeo work so well together, because the bulky Dark type that actually Weavile wouldn't love in Muck has just been broken by Keldeo, and the bulky Water Psychic type that Keldeo hates has just been broken by Weavile. So those two have already shown, yes, I've essentially lost my Weavile in that exchange, but those two have just shown, I'm going to sack it off here in fact, those two have just shown why they pair so nicely together, and we're going to speed this up a little bit now, as I don't think there's too much left that Keldeo really does in this. As I sack off. Oh yeah, Keldeo is able to come in again here, and now he's in a position where I guarantee a KO. Because of that Starmie going down, because I've been able to Pursuit Trap it, I guarantee a KO by just sacking off my Decidueye and getting in Keldeo. If I Scold here, or I Hydro Pump here, or anything like that, and he goes into Mimikyu, well essentially if he goes into Mimikyu on my Secret Sword, he has to play Rift the following turn, which means that he has to let me Scold, which means I could potentially burn him. while I'm breaking his disguise. So that's really not a good play. If he goes into Rotom, he's slower than me. He's already revealed his Eye of Pepperberry, not Scarf, and that means that even if he takes one Secret Sword, he won't take the second. If he goes into Medicham and takes a Secret Sword, he probably won't take the Hydro Pump the next turn. So it's a really, really difficult point where he essentially has to either go Mimikyu, let me get his Rocks Chip and potentially burn him, or he just gives me a KO. And that's what getting rid of that Starmie just really opened up for Keldeo, as we do pick up another KO here. So that's why I feel like these two paired so nicely together. Here I'm just going to go for Secret Sword. It doesn't do huge damage without a boosting item. He does get a decent chip off with Volt Switch, but now the Rotom is in range of rocks, and that was really all he could do there, was try and do that and pressure me in that way. And we're now able to just go out into the Hippo, and we'll put this back on really fast because for the most part, I think Keldeo's job is kind of done here, as yeah, we just sack off the Keldeo there. So that kind of shows you how Keldeo works out. I'm not going to spoil the rest of this game because I might upload this game in full with some proper commentary, depending on how things go. I don't know. So I'm not going to spoil the rest of this game. But yeah, that shows you why Keldeo and Weavile pair so nicely together, why they worked so well together in this game, why Mega Lati as well, you know, bringing in that bulky steel type there earlier in Ferrothorn, Draco Meteoring into it, and then switching it out into Keldeo to then reapply the pressure. It kind of shows you how well those two paired together, how well the Weavile paired with it, and how that all worked as a unit in this game, just freeing up the Keldeo to pick up 2 KOs. So that is the first half of our top 10 Pokemon in Gen 7 Draft League format. That took me so long. I've been recording for like 3 hours, editing for like 5 hours with graphics and stuff, and now I've got to edit all of this. Whew! Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed recording it. It was a trip down memory lane. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully you've been able to glean something from this. I don't know. I'm now going to sit and stare at the screen for another 5 hours while I edit this video. If you enjoyed it, please do show some support. Thank you so much for loafing around with me, and I'll catch you again next time.